What is good, everybody, man? Appreciate y'all tuning in right here on the Blue Bloods. I told y'all we were going to get back being consistent on Tuesday nights with these mailbags, man. Second straight week of all-season mailbags. And shout out to you guys, man. The live streams have been killing it. If y'all like them, I'm going to keep doing them, kind of getting in my groove back into the live stream thing. First off, announcements. Hit the like button on your way in. Make sure to like the stream. Share it if you're rocking with it. Also, we will be doing a call-in show. I'll kind of go through topics and then do the call lines. Also, want to make an announcement. If you're watching this on replay, do not call the number. I had like 4 people call me at like 5 o'clock this morning, 4 o'clock this morning, 8 o'clock this morning. Listen, if it's not live, don't call the number. I'm not going to pick up unless we're on the live stream. Also, still working through some technical issues in terms of call waiting. So if someone's on the line, it is going to deny your call. Just call back. We'll get you on the call line ASAP. But man, like the stream. Let's get into the episode, man. So first off, we're going to talk the top FCS contenders that I think are going to be there entering this 2022-2023 season. And I really wanted to do this. This was a requested topic by I believe his name's Waldo in the chat. If he's still in here, he messaged me on Instagram, was like, "Man, I really want to get a breakdown of how you're feeling about some of these top FCS teams as we roll into spring practices and things like that." So we're going to start there. And for me is I know this is going to sound almost cliche, but my number one favorite has to be North Dakota State right now, guys. Went 14-1 last year, won the national championship. Of course, their ninth national championship. And it's extremely rare, in my opinion. I think I've been covering college ball for a little while now, watching it for a long time. It's rare for a national champion to be returning as much talent as I think this North Dakota State team has this upcoming season. Last year, the media narrative, especially coming out of the spring season, was that it was the year to get North Dakota State. This was the year that you had to beat them and win your national title. So for me, I think it's very interesting that they won it, and they won it with a very young team. And so this 2022 team coming up looks to be even more talented than last year. I just want to walk through. I was looking through their roster and listen to the returning starters from these positions. They returned both starting quarterbacks from last year in Cam Miller and the Virginia Tech transfer Quincy Patterson. That kind of he shifted into a more of a wildcat role as the season moved along. They returned every single running back from that running back room, and they had one of the top rushing offenses in the FCS last year, including Hunter Lipke that exploded onto the scene in the playoffs, Tamarick Williams. They got some guys coming back from injury as well. So that running back room is going to be stacked. And then at wide receiver, they're returning everybody outside of Christian Watson, who we're going to talk about in just a minute. They got Phoenix Sproles coming back, their second leading wide receiver, Zach Mathis, some of those other guys in that wide receiving room. They've returned the kid Noah at the tight end spot, who a lot of people think could be an NFL caliber tight end. Plus that offensive line. Listen, I've said enough. If you're a member, you saw my film breakdown of the FCS National Championship. I did an in-depth film breakdown on that game. So if you want to check that out, become a member. Any price range will get you in there to see that film breakdown. They returned 4 out of 5 starters on that offensive line, plus the entire second unit from last season. So they returned 9 of the top 10 offensive lineman from that national championship team last year, which is almost unheard of. I mean, that is so impressive, and that is dangerous when you're looking at this North Dakota State team. Cordell Volson is probably the only one that they're losing up there. He potentially could be a second-round pick for North Dakota State going into the draft. Then the defensive line, they're going to have to replace some talent. That's where like the issue comes in for North Dakota State. They believe they're returning Spencer Wagee off of injury, but they have a lot of room up front where they're going to have some guys step up there. But then the linebacking units outside of just Jasir Cox, everyone from that linebacker unit is pretty much coming back too. They got multiple guys with starting experience coming back in that second level for North Dakota State. And then this is scary too. The entire secondary is back. including Michael Tutsi, who we had on the show. Shout out to him, a first team FCS All American, along with those excellent cornerbacks that really were a foundation piece last year running through the FCS playoffs. So they're returning pretty much everyone outside of Christian Watson, Cordell Volson, and Jasir Cox. I mean, this team is going to be absolutely loaded. They play Drake, and I believe it's North Carolina A&T as they're out of conference. I will be hard pressed to see North Dakota State lose more than one game next year. They might get caught slipping at South Dakota State or someone like that. I mean, this team is going to be loaded to the brim with talent. And most of their coaching staff, of course, is coming back. I mean, this team is going to be a problem come next season. It is going to be interesting to watch. And I think CFL speaks for a lot of all our FCS fans out there who aren't from Fargo. It's just, when is North Dakota State going to fall off? I mean, he said he's tired of seeing them win it all. If I had to put my money right now, guys, which is what this segment was, I'm putting my money on the Bison to repeat again. That's 10 national championships that they're going for this next season. And I think, and right now they're the favorite unless someone really emerges. And number 2 on my list, I'm going with Montana State. It's kind of cliche that my first 2 teams were both in the Natty, but you look at this team with the magical run to Frisco that they had, but injuries and running into the buzzsaw that was North Dakota State cost them their first national title since 1984. But this team's mindset is really what impressed me last year. Brent Vigen's building a great contender up there for Montana State, a former North Dakota State coach as well. But they overcame some major adversity right away. They lose their starting quarterback like the week before their first game in the FCS playoffs. Their starting quarterback enters the transfer portal. Insert freshman Tommy Millott, and he was my MVP for the playoffs last year, where he led this team into dominant wins over Sam Houston, a big win over South Dakota State in the semifinals. That kid can ball. He did get hurt in the national championship, so I have some concerns. He's having surgery this offseason. What is he going to look like the first few weeks of the season? They got another transfer quarterback coming in, but Tommy Millott's health is my one main concern for this team. When you go to the defensive side of the ball, Daniel Hardy, Troy Anderson, Chase Benson, all leaving, all great players, all should be drafted. We had Daniel on the show, man. Shout out to him. But I think this team has enough returning talent to carry them until those younger players step up and mature into their roles. I mentioned a lot. Isaiah Afonso is back at the running back spot. Now, how do you replace Lance McCutcheon? That's my biggest question. Lance McCutcheon at the wide receiver spot is arguably the number one question on the offensive side of the ball I have. And they returned 6 of their top 11 tacklers, but I really like Callahan O'Reilly at linebacker, Ty Okada at DB, and Brody, I believe is Grebby at the edge spot, who's probably going to step in for Amandre and or Daniel Hardy come next season. So I think they have a lot of talent, guys. Brent Vigen is a coach that has been there, done it. He knows what the formula is. I would not expect Montana State to take a huge step back, but there's only been a handful of teams to repeat going to Frisco, so it's going to be a tough journey for them. And some honorable mentions on my list too. South Dakota State, Missouri State, and Montana are teams you're going to have to look out for. I think all 3 of those teams have a team. If everything falls right for them, have teams that can go win in the FCS playoffs and get to Frisco. But real quick, my sleeper team, and I really want to kind of get this off my chest, and I've really put some thought into this. I wanted to give you guys a sleeper. I like trying to be putting my stuff out there, seeing what y'all think about it. And my sleeper team, and I'm not saying they're going to win it all, but I'm saying if everyone develops like I think they can, this team could be dangerous. And that's Stephen F. Austin. I really, really, really like the Lumberjacks this year. 8-4 last year, came probably one play away from beating Incarnate Word in the first round of the playoffs to move on to face Sam Houston in the second round. But it's going to be a big jump from losing in the first round, having that first round exit to getting to the FCS championship game. But they were young, and I think they have 2 or 3 guys on the offense that legit could be Walter Payton Award winners next season. They had guys, I want to put this in perspective, and shout out to Sam Herder for this little bit of stat here. Great guy over there at Hero Sports. We had him on. He listed this stat. The Lumberjacks had 17 all WAC selections last year. So 17 All-Americans. 10 were freshmen or sophomore. 10 All-Americans were freshmen and sophomore. They return Xavier Gibson. I think he's the best wide receiver in the FCS next year. Xavier Gibson is that guy. He was a Walter Payton Award finalist, led the FCS in receiving yards last year. Xavier Gibson is a problem. He is back. They also returned Trey Self, Miles Reed at the quarterback and running back spot, so that backfield stays intact. They've returned some really strong offensive linemen. They got one or two spots to replace, but I think overall as a unit, they won't take a big step back. And on the defensive side of the ball, 9 defensive starters returned. That includes BJ Thompson, Brevin Randall, Miles Brooks, Miles Hurd. All of those guys were first team all WAC selections. So they returned 4 first team All Americans, not even including the guys who got second and third team and honorable mentions. That defense, I think, is going to be much improved. And I also think it's going to be much more matured than what we saw last season for the Lumberjacks. So I think if you're looking for a dark horse, somebody who nobody is really going to see coming, I think Stephen F. Austin fits that bill because you're going to have a lot of players mature. And so the number one key is Trey Self has to develop at the quarterback spot, limit the turnovers, and give me a bit more production in big games. But then also the defense has to come through in big moments too. They've really struggled stopping Cameron Ward when it mattered most. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing because Cameron Ward was on another level for Incarnate Word last year, but the defense has to go win them those big games. And so I think that's going to be the key for me for Stephen F. Austin to be my dark horse. But I really like North Dakota State next year right now, guys. If I had to be completely honest with you, they're probably going to win it all if I had to put my money on it. Coach Simmons says NDSU needs to stop being scared. They're a Power 5 team hiding in the FCS. So Coach Simmons, okay, so we'll go through this briefly for everyone in here. I know some people in here might have heard it. So I've done my research. I've talked to some people in Fargo. I've gotten all the facts on this. NDSU isn't scared to go Power 5. They literally just haven't had the offer yet. Um, it's because geographically they don't fit with any conference. They don't geographically fit with the Mountain West, so they're scared to put them in there because they don't want to increase travel costs. They don't fit in the MAC, so they don't want to increase travel costs because North Dakota across to the East Coast is a huge travel cost for those Group of 5 teams. Also, geographically, the best fits are the Big 10 or the Big 12, and you cannot make the jump to Power 5 from FCS immediately. So their best bet for North Dakota State would be to go independent, but also looking at their finances, they don't have the finances to go FBS independent immediately. I've talked to some people who said they might be looking into it, but right now, guys, do not expect NDSU to move up to Power 5 or move up to FBS in right now. And also, I think their stadium is borderline right on the limit to make that move as well. So I think there's a lot more financial hurdles for NDSU holding them back, Coach Simmons. Also, geographical fit. For them to move up, South Dakota State will probably have to move up and offer the dual Dakota schools to the FBS. I think we talked about this on another episode, but that's kind of like the short version of why NDSU cannot move up right now. Thoughts on James Madison's schedule? So CFL, I'm gonna do a show kind of about the teams that moved up eventually, but just real quick, man, I think it's a brutal schedule. They have a tough schedule for in terms of I think they got Appalachian State on the road in Boone, which is going to be a brutal game. I mean, Appalachian State, Coastal Carolina, UL, those teams in the Sun Belt, man, are no joke. And I think CFL, there's going to be a learning curve this year for James Madison. I think if you can get to 5 wins this year, if you're James Madison, that is going to be giant, in my opinion. I think that's a great start to come out into FBS, into the Sun Belt, who I think is a top tier Group of 5 conference CFL. So I wouldn't expect James Madison to set the world on fire, CFL, but let's give them 1 to 2 years. They're going into a tough conference. They're not moving up to the CUSA or something like that. They're moving into a legit conference in the Sun Belt. And so I would imagine CFL, James Madison will take a short step back because you got to think, man, they're going up against schools that have had more money, better revenue sharing, and also more scholarships for multiple years. So give James Madison a year or two to get that depth built, get that FBS money running through. James Madison will be fine. See, I just think it's going to take some time. So I would not expect James Madison to set the world on fire this season, in my opinion. NDSU is like Alabama playing in the FCS. They're supposed to win. That's fair enough. Talk about their big advantage in recruiting. They do have a big advantage in recruiting because they're the sole school up there. So any kid from up there, like that Midwest region, they're probably going to land Mr. Wilson. So what's up, Kedrick, man? Appreciate the support, man. Y'all make sure to like the stream. But so that's my FCS contenders, man. So let's move on real quick to the NFL Combine that is coming up. There were some great FCS athletes represented. I know a lot of people were mad about some snubs. I thought there were a few. I know Akil Glass comes to mind. I know James Houston comes to mind. For me, I personally think Eric Barrier was a snub too, especially since he didn't get any All-Star game appearances either. But that's just me. There's always going to be snubs. Even if they invite those three guys, you can look to the next three and say they were snubs too. I understand there's a set limit, but I do think those three guys earned their way to Indianapolis. But for me, looking at the players with the most to gain here, I'm going to start with one, and I don't mean to get on this theme, but it's got to go to Fargo right now, man. Christian Watson. That's a name I want you guys to remember. And if you watch my show, you know I'm very high on this kid. Christian Watson, wide receiver from North Dakota State. I think, even though there's players with higher grades, such as Trevor Penning and some of these guys, I think Christian Watson has the most to gain in the NFL Combine. And I picked a lot of skill players in my list of players to watch because the NFL Combine is not really built for linemen. You don't see a lot of linemen, especially offensive linemen, really shine at the combine outside of bench press or things like that. There's not really a way to show your physicality and things like that. So I think this is more of a skill player event because everyone's going to look at the 40s, the broad jumps, the verts, the catching drills, the throwing drills. So I think this is a skill player quarterback event, in my opinion. I don't think the offensive linemen and defensive linemen benefit as much as the skill players. That's what the Senior Bowl, HBCU Legacy Bowl, the NFLPA game is for those offensive linemen to really show their skills in one-on-ones and things like that. But the reason I say Christian Watson here, guys, this kid put on an absolute show at the Senior Bowl. Walking away, I was talking to some scouts after the game, and he really put some scouts on. And there's a lot of people saying that he could be a borderline first round pick if he puts on at the pro day and NFL combine. This guy is 6'4", 210. And I really do think he can push that high 4.3, low 4.4 range at that size. This kid has the speed, he has the route running, the footwork, and just the versatility. And I mentioned this in the Senior Bowl preview. He's played running back. He can bring on a jet sweep. He can play slot. He can play on the outside. He can play any wide receiving spot you want in an offense. And he's also a first team All-American kick returner and punt returner. So I think that versatility already has scouts intrigued. If he goes out there, like I think he will, and puts on just an athletic domination of the 40 and the vert and the broad jump and the shuttle and everything like that and the catching drills, I think Christian Watson, you're going to hear his name all weekend. All week at the NFL Combine, they're going to be talking about this kid from North Dakota State. And I've went as far, and I know some people are going to say this is a stretch, but I consider myself I really rock with the FCS this year. I think there's a lot of great prospects that are being overlooked. I think Christian Watson, 5 years down the road, we could look back and say he was the biggest steal in this wide receiving class. I like him more than Olave. I like him more than Garrett Wilson. Jamison Williams is coming off an ACL. I think Christian Watson could be that good. I saw him drop multiple players at the Senior Bowl in one-on-ones with his route running. I mean, drop them on their butts, man, hit the ground, and he just went off and caught a slant pass or something. I mean, in tight spaces, he's so shifty, and he can make some really tough catches. I saw him beat Kobe Bryant from Cincinnati, one of the top DBs in this class. I've seen him do it against the top level competition at the Senior Bowl. I think Christian Watson's the number one player to watch at the NFL Combine. Next, we'll go to the other side of the ball. Marquise Bell from FAMU. This is an event that was built for players like Marquise Bell, similar to Christian Watson. when you look at measurables, I don't know if there's a guy from the FCS that is going to win the measurable battle like a Marquise Bell. He has the length, he has the speed, he has the ball skills, and I really think he's going to be able to put on a major show down up there in Indianapolis. I think this year you really saw him kind of take a step back, be a leader of the defense, but he didn't put up gaudy numbers because you have Antoine Collier next to you, who was an absolute stud, a big upgrade from what he played with, the past 3 years of his career. That defensive line did their job, but I think you saw in that Southeastern Louisiana playoff game, Antoine Collier and him put on a show, and you saw why Marquise Bell was the player he was. He had a sack against Jackson State on a big blitz in the red zone in the Orange Blossom Classic. I really do like Marquise Bell and what he's going to bring to an NFL roster. I think a third, fourth round pick is absolutely there for him. I want to see what his 40 is. I'm hoping it's low 4.5, somewhere around there. He's a safety. We don't need him to be in the 4.3, or anything range. Give me a solid 4.5. Show off your ball skills. You're going to win the measurables. And I think Marquise Bell could really prove himself at the NFL Combine. And I think with him not going to the Senior Bowl like a lot of people thought, he put on in the NFLPA game. I think Marquise Bell's on some radars this weekend, so don't expect him to be overlooked. The other player, y'all know his name. FAMU fans, plug your ears. Cole Kelly from Southeastern Louisiana at quarterback. I think this weekend is big for him because a lot of people try to look at arm strength, and I really do think he could have the strongest arm in this class. This kid could spin the football, and I really do think people want to look at him compared to some of those top FBS quarterbacks side by side. You want to see him next to the Matt Corrals and Kenny Pickett's and etc. He didn't get to go to the Senior Bowl. He won the MVP at the NFLPA Bowl. He put on there in a game situation. You see how his size and athleticism and his arm strength really played into that game. He had a great game. So did Akil Glass. But his size, I think, there's people I've talked to a few scouts, and I'm trying to get some scouts on the show for you guys as we approach the draft. So y'all know it, y'all hear it from their mouths and not mine. There's some people quietly saying that he could be the Josh Allen type prospect out of this class, where he comes from a small school. He's big. A lot of people overlook him, and he comes into the NFL and becomes a star just because of his arm strength. His decision making has improved since he left Arkansas and things like that. So I really do think Cole Kelly this next week is going to have to prove himself in a big way. I think his athleticism is going to pop off at 6'7", 260, over 20-something rushing touchdowns. I think when you look at the production, the Walter Payton Award winning, the All-Americans, the runs that he made with Southeastern, I really do think Cole Kelly is going to have a big weekend. I think the NFLPA game further solidified that he's not the quarterback that everyone thought was a bust at Arkansas, and this kid can play. So I really think Cole Kelly is going to have a big week. And then finally, my honorable mention before we move on, Dejean Dixon. Y'all remember him. He's the wide receiver from the NFLPA game from Nichols that just had a ridiculous game. And I mean, all week during practice, people were buzzing about him. I talked to a few people who went out there to LA for that game. Dejean Dixon had a big week. And I think you saw that in terms of what he did in the game again in the NFLPA game. So I'm going to mention him as an honorable mention as somebody who could have a big week. I don't know what his speed's going to be, but he's been a multiple time first team All-American over there at Nichols. And I do think that if he puts on a big athletic showing that he could be on some draft boards. So I'd like to see that. Let's see right here. Aaron said, where do you think, or who do you think Jacksonville State will do in the FBS? I think Jacksonville State will do just fine. I'm interested to see what recruiting is going to be like, Aaron. I think they have a very tough recruiting, I would say, landscape to navigate. You got Alabama, Auburn, going to get the first pick of the state usually in terms of Alabama prospects. Then you got to compete with UAB. Then you got to compete with Troy. Then you still have to compete with Alabama State and Alabama A&M and North Alabama. And you got Samford. And so you have a lot of teams just in your state that you're competing with. And if you expand that to Georgia and Mississippi and Florida, you have the whole country to face. So I think Jacksonville State's biggest challenge, I will call it, is just establishing the recruiting presence as an FBS program, because now you're not going to be looked upon in terms of FBS transfers coming to Jacksonville State like it was, where every Auburn player that didn't make it would transfer down to FCS and go to Jacksonville State. You're going to have to recruit out of high school. And so I think that's going to be the biggest thing for Jacksonville State is I think if I had to say it, I'm going to say they're going to have a tougher time than James Madison. Aaron, I think James Madison will be good at the FBS level quicker than Jacksonville State will. And I'll keep it at that right now. He did his thing, camp front man. Cole Kelly balled, man. And I think this was about Marquise Bell. I agree. And so finally, man, I know a lot of y'all have been waiting on this one. I got my way too early spring SWAC power rankings. And so this isn't my predictions for the year. This isn't my recruiting rankings, anything like that. This is taking the totality of recruiting, what the roster looks like right now, who's coming back, the coaching stability, everything like that. I'm going to give you my top 5 with some honorable mentions on how I would rank the SWAC right now, regardless of division. So I'll start with my honorable mentions, and I'm going to work my way up. My honorable mentions right now, so this is like my 6, 7, and 8 range. I'm going to put Alcorn, Alabama State, and Texas Southern. I think those teams are just on the outside looking in terms of like my top 5 contenders right now. For Alcorn, the reason I put them here is you lost your number 1 target in CJ Bowler. You lost a quarterback that just was a baller. You could say what you want about his size. You could say whatever you want about his arm strength, but Felix, the kid was just a winner. Then the kid was a baller and would go out and make plays for you. And I think the intangibles that Felix Harper had, the leadership and the continuity within the program is going to be hard to replace, even with the kid from LA Tech that they got this year. So I'm going to put Alcorn right on the outside looking in right now because I want to see what their quarterback room looks like. And I think right now, you saw it in the Jackson State game, the line of scrimmage has to shore up for them. And I don't know if they necessarily, I want to see how that gels for them. So I'm going to put Alcorn right on the outside. They're my first honorable mention because I also can't count out Fred McNair and what he's done as a head coach. Alabama State, it's a quarterback thing for me. Until you cannot, I don't think you can be in the top 4 if you don't have at least a solid option at quarterback. And I don't know what Alabama State's quarterback room looks like. I really like Joe Owens. Ryan Nettles took a big step back last year. And also they have a new coach, which also deducts a few points because we don't know what Eddie Robinson Jr. is going to turn that team into. And then Texas Southern, I have them about 8th because I love Andrew Body. I think he's a playmaker. I really think he has the ability to be a top quarterback in the SWAC, but you lose Jonathan Giles, you lose some of your offensive line, you lose a lot of your defensive playmakers like Michael Badigeau, who we had on the show today. I think that defense has to get better. So that, for me, is what's holding Texas Southern back in terms of an honorable mention. Now, 5th, I'm going to put Southern. I know they got a new head coach, but I think Dooley is very familiar with what is with what's going on here. And on top of that, I love that they returned Jordan Lewis. I know they lost Jatari Carter, but they returned a lot of the production from the front 5. And also they returned most of those great running backs that they had last year. And so for me, I'm gonna put Southern here just because I feel like they have a bit more stability moving forward than some of the teams behind them. And also for me, I think that they got to figure out the quarterback situation, right? I just feel like it's right there, and I think they made a great run last year without a quarterback, and they were rotating quarterbacks with Skelton and Lampley and the other kid, and so I think if Southern finds quarterback consistency, they could be a problem. But I really like what their defense is probably going to be next year, so I'm going to slide them into the 5th spot. 4th, I'm going to put Grambling right now. And I know that might surprise some people. They probably would have been higher if the whole Art Briles and Hugh Jackson thing wasn't going on right now. But just looking at it from a roster standpoint, I think they're going to make a big jump. I think they solved a lot of their offensive issues because last year there was no playmakers on the outside. The running game was average and the passing game was atrocious. They couldn't throw the ball whatsoever. I mean, I really do think I could pick randomly from the people who have commented on this show, and we may be able to put an offense that could rival what Grambling put up last year in terms of air production. They had single digit passing touchdowns last year, guys. Single digit. They had 9. 9 passing touchdowns for the entire season. I need to know how that's even possible in today's age of college football. You have 9 passing touchdowns and you have double-digit interceptions. That's not going to work with the SWAC moving more toward just a pass-heavy, high-scoring league. Grambling is not going to be able to function like that. You bring in Hugh Jackson. He brings in Holloway at the quarterback spot to add a little bit of juice to that room, and he recruited every single like 6'5", 6'6" wide receiver that possibly could go to Grambling. It was impressive how he loaded up in the wide receiving room. So I'm going to put Grambling in my 4th spot for the power rankings. Third, I'm going to put Alabama A&M. I think when you look at, I think they brought in, if I'm not mistaken, it was like 16 DBs. If I'm not mistaken, 16 DBs. They brought in multiple defensive linemen. I mean, they targeted the defense so hard. I mean, there might be 11 new faces on that defense next year, and I think that was needed. I know that seems dramatic, but if there was a team in the country that needed to replace all 11 starters on the defensive side of the ball, it was Alabama A&M. I think Jaron Williams and Quincy Casey both can be good quarterbacks. I don't know who's winning the battle right now. I don't have my sources like some of the other people like Scotty and other YouTubers in terms of getting inside camp information on that. But I have heard a little bit for some of those people that Jaron Williams is looking really good right now. So I like that they're going to have a quarterback. I think Quarles at running back is going to be a stud, and that wide receiving room was loaded last year. So I don't know if the offense is going to take a huge step back. So I'm going to put Alabama A&M in the 3rd spot for right now. Number 2, I'm putting FAMU. I know I rode the bandwagon, but I don't want to be biased on this. They're number 2 right now. Rashawn McKay, or is it going to be the kid from Vandy? I don't know. That's the biggest question. And also, Bishop Bonnet takes a step away, but you got Jennings and you got some depth at that running back spot that I think you can replace them with. Replacing the offensive line is a big deal. I thought they did a nice job of it in the early signing period. And also replacing Antoine Collier and Marquise Bell might be the hardest thing that Willie Simmons has had to do up to this point at FAMU, is replace two FBS talent at safety in the same year. I think they did that with Jordan Moore in one spot, who's going to play next to him. And also, I do think the linebacking room is greatly improved. They got the kid from Indy Community College, I think is going to shore up that middle linebacker spot. Isaiah Land is back. Gentle Hunt's back. I think that defensive line is going to be one of the top in the SWAC. And of course, number 1, I mean, listen, if you listen to any channel, and any of them, Swag Buzz, CFL, DJ, Scotty, anybody, if anybody doesn't have Jackson State number 1 in their power rankings right now, I don't know what to tell you. It has to be Jackson State right now, especially looking at with them returning Shador, Malikov. You also return just a bunch of talent on the defensive side of the ball as well. With Aubrey, with Nugget. I mean, you have so much talent, man. Let's just be honest. You land Travis Hunter, you land Kevin Coleman, you're running back that supposedly everyone thinks and is coming, right now Tyson Alexander is coming back. Everyone thinks he's going to be the solution at running back. The only question you have to have is, one, how do you replace James Houston? Because listen, you got some good defensive ends in there. How do you replace James Houston? And I'm not saying that there's probably not a recruit that's going to replace him completely. Who can combine their talents to replace what he did? Because I mean, that guy was a game wrecker alone. I mean, if you take James Houston away, I don't know. I don't know if Jackson State wins all their SWAT games last year. That's how good he was at the defensive end spot. And then the offensive line. I'm gonna say it until I'm blue in the face. The offensive line has to be better. And I think they did a great job of focusing on that. You look at the 2 kids, Zach Bro and I'm like Evan Henry from ULM. Those 2 guys are going to be great on the interior. I think you got a solid center and guard. The only question is who plays the other guard. Tony Gray's probably at tackle. Are you going to put Simi at the other tackle? I would assume so. Who's going to be that other guard? That's the question. And then you got a more talented offensive line, in my opinion. But like I've said repeatedly, like y'all seen in my offensive line interviews, you can have all the talent at the world at the offensive line spot. If you don't gel and there's not communication, then there's a problem. And I think you saw that even in the Jackson State documentary. I think Coach Prime saw that the offensive line was a problem very early in the season. and he challenged them. And I think even in the preview for the episode tonight, you heard James Houston on the preview that Coach Prime posted pretty much yelling that the offense sucks. And you saw Shador kind of pushing him back. And I could only imagine how bad that offensive line struggled blocking James Houston in practice. I can only imagine how brutal that was for that offensive line. They have to be better. Your number one playmaker is Shador Sanders and what he can do distributing the football to the outside. If you cannot protect him and you cannot run the ball, there's a blueprint right now for how to beat you from South Carolina State. You have to give Shador time, because if you give him time, the weapons are there on the outside where he's going to pick most SWAC defenses apart. So I'm going to have to put Jackson State number one. Currently right now for my SWAC power rankings. But man, that's my power rankings. I'll answer some questions. The call lines are open. Remember, I don't have a waiting room like Scotty right now. I'm trying to get that fixed. So if you call in while I'm on a call with someone, it's going to send you to voicemail. Just call back when I'm off the next call and we'll get this rolling. We'll get you on the call line. Let's see. Which QB room would be the most competitive, Alabama, A&M, or Grambling? So to be honest, I'm gonna go with Alabama A&M, and it's only because I'll say this: it's because I think Halloween is that much better than Noah Bowden right now. I didn't see anything from Noah last year that made me feel like he was the guy. And Halloween has a lot of potential. He was just caught in a very deep quarterback room at UCLA, and Chip Kelly was never going to bench Dorian Thompson Robinson, regardless of what he did. So I don't think Halloween got the chance. He got to mature. He knows what the college life is. He's coming in for a business trip. And so I just think, for me, Alabama A&M is more competitive because Quincy Casey and Jaron Williams are more evenly matched. So I think it's going to be a tougher decision on Connell Maynard compared to what it's going to be for Hugh Jackson. If I had to put my money on it, I know some Grambling fans might not agree with me. I personally think Halloween is going to be named the starter by the end of spring practice. And I think the Alabama A&M QB battle will probably rage into fall practices, if I had to imagine. Let's see. The great King Leo said, with the way transfer portal is set up currently, do you think more FCS team could still top recruits in high school? Potentially. Potentially. So here's what I'll say. I think it's possible, but also you got to look at a lot of these top FBS teams. I personally think what you're going to see is the FCS teams lean more on the transfer portal. I think a lot of the top FBS teams you're seeing, they're still going to have more high schoolers and transfers, most likely, unless they get a new coach. Because like Lincoln Riley landed all his former players from Oklahoma, so you're going to have a lot of players following their coach in that situation. But I would personally imagine the FCS is actually going to probably lean more on the transfer portal if I had to guess. Now there may be some that are differ, like a North Dakota State. Yeah, they might be able to land some top high school recruits. I think you saw Campbell do that. Campbell landed, I think, 15 3-stars and like a 4-star this year. So if you take the high school approach, I think the opportunity is there. But the problem is, I think more teams are going to take the Jackson State approach and do like a 75% transfer portal, and there's only going to be a handful of spots for high schoolers. And that would be my take on it. But I do think the potential is there, man. Let's see. How do you feel about FCS playoffs expanding to 28 teams? Only 4 teams get by. D2 has 17, FCS has 15. Let's see, Lawrence. I'm gonna say no. I don't think expanding helps the issue, Lawrence, because it's still a for me, and the biggest critique from SWAC fans and even some Ivy League people, which Ivy League probably isn't going to play in it regardless. Let's just be honest. But the biggest thing for them is the financial benefit of it. That they're saying that the travel's too much, there's too many games. And so I don't think adding more games is going to solve anything for the playoffs. I think 24 is fine. If you're not in the top 25, Lawrence, I have a problem seeing that you get a shot at the national title, if that makes sense. I think if you're in the top 25, you probably get a shot. And I think that 24 team playoff fits that because you're probably going to have a SWAC team ranked. You're probably going to have an Ivy League team ranked like Jackson State and Princeton this year. So I think you get your top 25 teams and they all get a shot to go play a national title. And I think expanding it also makes travel more complicated. I think it potentially adds more first round games, which are the least watched games. And so I don't think expanding really there's no benefit in my opinion, Lawrence, right now. So I would say no. I would say keep it at 24 and or lower it a little bit. I'm even for lowering it before I am expanding it anymore. I think 24 is a good range. But I think 28. I personally don't see 28 being a thing right now. Do you think MVSU can have a winning season this fall? They could probably have a winning season, Chris. I don't see them competing for the SWAC. And it's mostly due to them not having a quarterback. I think anybody who wins the SWAC this year or is going to compete to win the SWAC this year has to have good quarterback play. And I just don't see Valley right now having that. I know they landed the number one kid from JUCO out of as the East Mississippi or something like that. Um, I think right now they could have a winning season. I think probably third place in the division is probably the ceiling right now, Chris. I don't think they're going to jump FAMU or Alabama A or both of those teams. They might catch one of them, but I think a third place finish right now for MVSU is probably the ceiling, Chris. But I mean, maybe a winning record at least. But I think Valley's going to take a step forward. But until I know they got a quarterback, man, I think that it puts a hard cap on their potential. How many wins right now do you estimate each of your top 5 SWAC teams winning this season as we go into spring? Oh, I'll have to pull up the schedule, but if I'll try to do it off the top of my head. I think right now, if I had to set like the over under, Michael, for each team, uh, mm, this is going to be tough, man. You put me on the spot on this one. I'm trying to kind of put it in there. I think Jackson State probably around 10 to 11. I think over under 10 would probably be what Vegas would set it as, which is like right in the middle. I think they possibly could slip up and lose a game. I have a hard press seeing them go undefeated this year. I really do. I think they're going to be very good. It's just so hard to go undefeated this year. I mean, in college football in general, I mean, hell, our national champions all last year, Georgia had a loss, North Dakota State had a loss. It's just hard to go undefeated for the season, and so I think 10 wins right now for Jackson State would be strong. I'm going to give FAMU 8 to 9. I think UNC you could pretty much drub up as a loss, and I don't see them going undefeated in the SWAC either. So they're at least probably going to have 2 losses. I would imagine possibly 3, depending on how the schedule plays out. So I'm going to put FAMU about 9 right now in terms of over under wins, 8 or 9 for FAMU. Alabama A&M, I'm gonna go 7 to 8. It's probably gonna be like that, man. Just take a win off as I go down the list, 7 or 8. I personally think their schedule's brutal. I mean, those first 4 games, I don't think they will. It would not shock me though if Alabama A&M was 0-4 to start the season, Michael. I think when you look at what UAB and Troy are, those are very low percentage games for Alabama A&M. If they upset it, that'd be great. What a storyline for the SWAC. What a win for Connell Maynard. But I would possibly say you're probably starting out 0-2, and then you got Austin P. Not going to be a pushover game, probably a winnable game. That's probably where the win will come in, and then you got to go to FAMU. That's going to be a brutal game in Bragg. That fan base is going to be pumped up for it, and I think that game's going to be a tough one to win on the road for Alabama A&M. So those first 4 games, man, are brutal. That's the toughest first 4 games in the conference this year. So I would imagine that's going to be a tough one to win. So I'd probably put it about 7 for Alabama A&M, and then for Grambling and Southern, I'd probably put 6 or 7 somewhere in there, probably 7 range for them. I think whoever finishes above the other one, I think it's going to come down to the Bayou Classic, the last week of the season for them. Whoever wins the Bayou Classic will probably have 7. The loser has 6, right around there. I think they both have really tough games. I think Arkansas State for Grambling week 1 is going to be a tough one. They have the old Tennessee coach Butch Jones over the program right now. Southern has an easier schedule. They have the LSU game is a guaranteed loss. That game's going to be a slaughter. But I think Southern's winning over under has to be a little higher because their out of conference isn't that hard. They get 2D2 teams on their schedule in Virginia, Lynchburg, and I forget the other one, but they just don't have a very tough schedule. So I think Southern has a chance to rack up some wins just because their out of conference schedule is not super difficult compared to an Alabama A&M, even Jackson with Campbell. I don't think Southern really went out of their way to schedule very difficult games, in my opinion. So I think that would kind of be about where my wins are right now, Michael, off the top of my head. Sean Vardman is currently winning the left tackle spot at JSU. That's interesting. I need to look into him a little bit, Imperial, man. Appreciate that insight, though. Chris said, with James Madison officially gone, which CAA school do you believe will have the most success in the foreseeable future? Um, hmm. So immediately, probably Villanova. Villanova has a really good team this year. Had a really good team last year, won the CAA last year. But I'm gonna go with a new team. And with the CAA, how it's structured right now and the teams in it, I really like the trajectory of Monmouth. I think that's a team you're going to have to kind of watch out for. I really like some of the recruiting that they've done recently. Their quarterback, man, is a stud in Tony Muskett right now. They've had some All-Americans on that team throughout the past few years that have really shined. I think Monmouth is going to be tough. Villanova and Monmouth would be my top two picks, and depending on how North Carolina A&T progresses, I think they could be a close third. But I really, really like Villanova and Monmouth, and I really like Monmouth moving into the CAA and seeing what they can put together, man. I think Monmouth next year is going to be someone to really, really watch in the CAA over the next few coming years, and I think Monmouth and Villanova are going to be my picks there, man, for the CAA schools. The FCS playoffs would be helped if the NCAA funded the playoffs like they do FBS. I agree with you, Clarence. 100% agree with you on that one, man. It would definitely be helped. I agree. Southern has a very good chance to have one of the best pass rushing defenses in FCS with Lewis and Jason Greathouse and also Trey Lang. Southern will be a contender. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. Hang on, I think we got a call coming in. Caller, you're live.
Hey, what's going on, Blue? Can you hear me?
Yep, I got you. Guys, comment, make sure y'all can hear him, but go ahead, man.
Hey, yeah, love the show, man. Love the channel, man. Make sure y'all like the stream, support Blue, man. I got two questions if you don't mind. So my first question, you know how when the NFL starts the season, they start out with the Super Bowl champion on Thursday, and also like in soccer, like they have two different championships too, and those two champions face each other before the regular season starts. What do you think if like maybe like in week 0 they set up a game between the FBS champion and the FCS champion every year?
That would actually be interesting. The only problem is, man, I just don't know if it would ever be competitive. Because I mean, you would still have the funding and the scholarship limits and everything like that. And like, yes, we'll take North Dakota State because I mean they've won what 9 out of the last 12, so the odds are it'd be North Dakota State more often than not. And then Alabama, Georgia, even though they've knocked off Iowa, they've knocked off some of these ranked teams like Kansas State. Man, I have a tough time ever seeing North Dakota State knock off an Alabama or Georgia. I mean, they have so much talent, man. I mean, and they're almost hoarders of talent, really and truly. Like Alabama this year is losing a potential number 1 pick in Evan Neal at offensive tackle, and they have 3 5-stars on the bench, and one of them was the number 1 offensive tackle 2 classes ago that has just been sitting in the background and is probably going to be a first-round pick himself. I mean, the talent gap in when you have a talent gap like that, where the extra 20 scholarships Alabama has are all 5 stars and 4 stars, man, that's real tough to overcome. But what I think a better idea would be, well, not a better idea, but one that I think would be more competitive is I would love to see the SWAC or Ivy League champion face the FCS champion week 1, because those teams don't have a chance to they don't have a chance to play in the playoffs or they opted out, because some teams want to play, like FAMU went and played this year. But I think doing something like that where you have the FCS champion play the Ivy League champion or play the SWAC champion in a neutral site game would be really cool to see. Or even, and I know it was one of our last episodes I talked about this, I would like to see a week 0 game for the SWAC champion versus the Ivy League champion too. I think if neither of them are going to go to the playoffs, why not make that a postseason game, like a bowl game, like a Celebration Bowl opt-off, or a week 1 game if you don't want to get rid of the Celebration Bowl. I think that would be interesting because I don't think people understand the Ivy League does have fans. Like, people go to Harvard and Yale and Princeton games. It's just not publicized because, I mean, they're kind of off in their own little bubble. So I would like to see that. But the problem is, as man, it sounds good. I would be really worried that I don't know if we'd ever see an FCS champion win. You know what I mean? Just because it's just like
Right.
it's an uneven playing field right now. But I do like the idea though, especially because North Dakota State has had problems getting the FBS teams to respond. Like I think this year they're playing Arizona, and it's the first team that scheduled them since they knocked off a top 15 team because everyone's scared to schedule them. So if it was like a contractual agreement, I think it would help North Dakota State kind of fill out their schedule.
Okay. All right. And last question. In the FCS, who are your top two prospects that you're looking forward to seeing the most? As far as like prospects that's going to go to the draft the following year.
So next year's NFL prospects. Oh,
Right.
hmm. So I think I talked about him earlier today. I really like Xavier Gibson from Stephen F. Austin. He led the FCS in receiving this year. And he just had his ball skills, man, are unbelievable. And he's got that little bit of speed. I mean, he's going to be the Christian Watson of this year's draft class. So I think Xavier Gibson is my immediate thought. And then just in terms, I wish he didn't transfer. As I would say Cameron Ward, because I think Cameron Ward is going to be just a stud at the next level coming out of Incarnate Word. But he transferred, so I'll be fair with that. Um, and there's so many good options now that I'm thinking about it. I'm like shifting through my brain trying to come up with one good one. For me, I also like Isaiah Afonso from Montana State, man. I really am. He's just a bowling ball. He just reminds me of that running back that just plays with such a low center of gravity. You can't hit him. I mean, he just bounces off of you like a pinball machine, and he reminds me kind of like a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if that makes sense, where he's just low to the ground. He's a factor out of the backfield. I really really like him, and then probably, man, if I had to pick one from like the SWAC too, because I like to give those guys a shout out. Oh man, this is gonna be tough. Also, I'll have to give my guy a Nugget a shout out. For Jackson
Yeah.
State, man. The at DB there, I think this year, in my opinion, I don't know if Mr. Moore is watching the stream or not. I think this year was a wake up call for him, man, because he came into the year with such high expectations. Everyone was saying Nugget is the best corner in the country. And he didn't have a great year in terms of like off the field. I mean, he didn't start multiple games, got held out of a few games due to off the field stuff. I think this was a wake up call for him. Whereas I went from being the one of the top draft prospects in the SWAC to having to come back because I didn't have enough production on the field and there were some question marks. So I think, man, nothing's going to be scarier than a motivated Nugget next year.
Word. All right, man. Hey, man. Appreciate the call, man. I'm enjoying your videos, man. Keep doing your thing.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Thank you. Let's see. Let's see. I got Dave over here. FCS versus FBS champion. Yes, great idea. Whoever that was. Also, NDSU has reached out to Alabama and Clemson for a game. They declined. I'm not surprised. Listen, once you're kind of branded. Once you beat a top team, like I think Montana's probably going to have the same thing happen now that they knocked off Washington last year and pretty much got their coach fired. In all actuality, too. Let's see. Richmond is also tough. Hey Blue, how important do you feel it is for HBCUs to have a guy drafted this year with the momentum they have now? I think it's a foregone conclusion, man. Listen, CB, I think someone's going to be drafted. I don't know. I don't know who. I would imagine James Houston's probably going to get drafted. Akil has a shot in the late rounds. Marquise Bell is probably going to get drafted. I have a tough time, CB, seeing any less than 2 to 3 players from HBCUs get drafted. I think there's also some MEAC guys that have a shot. Dejean Dixon, who I'm dropping his interview tomorrow, man. Make sure to check that out. But I think Dejean Dixon from Norfolk State has put on just a clinic this postseason. So I think he could be drafted. But I do think it's important, man. You mentioned all the positive momentum, the positive network coverage and things like that we've seen for HBCUs this year. it's very important to have a guy drafted, but I think it's coming. I really do think that there's multiple guys from the HBCUs that are good enough to be drafted. And on top of that, and I know I always, mention this on after I say all that too, is I want to see more FCS guys in general get drafted too. There's a big problem of people just, and I've talked to some scouts about this and some people. They said that a lot of the times it's a function of, oh, we can get this guy later. He's our sleeper, but we're probably going to be able to sign him as an undrafted free agent, and he can be our sleeper in later rounds. And so players from the FCS HBCU slip because teams feel like they have to get the Power Five player that has all the clout first because other teams know about him. And it's a terrible mindset in my opinion. But listen, man, the narrative's changing. HBCU players should be drafted this year, and if they don't, I have no answer why, and I'm going to be questioning my entire football knowledge on how that on how that happened. So it's going to this year. There should be no less than 4 to 5 HBCU players. I think 2 to 3 SWAC minimum. CB. Chris, do you have a theory on why Texas Southern has been unsuccessful in producing a winning team despite being located in Houston? Um, it's because, man, Chris, it's honestly probably because they're just second fiddle to the rest of the teams around Texas, man. Texas, Florida, really Texas and Florida, because California's got some teams and everyone picks from there. But Texas and Florida, man, that's so hard to recruit there. That's why I give Willie Simmons and FAMU so much props for pulling that team the way it has out of Florida and recruiting all those great kids. But man, look at the teams that Texas Southern has to compete with for the top players out of Houston. Texas A&M, Texas, TCU, Texas Tech, Baylor, and then on top of all the FCS Texas teams, Sam Houston, Stephen F. Austin. I mean, there's so many teams that you're going to have to compete with out of Texas, Chris, for recruits that is crazy. And then on top of that, you got Alabama landing 8 players from the state of Texas last recruiting class. So even though it's deep, it's a worldwide fight to keep those kids in town and state. And so I think right now with Texas Southern, even though they have remarkable facilities and everything, they've just kind of been overlooked. And I think you've seen their basketball program really benefit from it, but their football program hasn't been able to do it. And also, it really hurts when kids go on a visit, Chris, and there's 1,000 people in the stands. I'm going to keep it real with that. It doesn't help that there's nobody going to those games. You have a beautiful stadium, you got beautiful facilities, but nobody's there. And so how do you convince a kid on a visit when he's visiting your school most likely, and then he's going to Texas A&M the next week in Kyle Field? It it's different, and so it's really hard. They got to get the fan involvement up over there at Texas Southern, and I think you also got to get more resources into the football program and things like that, and just branding Texas Southern better. And they did a great job keeping Andrew Body and some of those players at home. And you saw some people transfer back like Giles and Badajo at the defensive end spot. You see some guys coming back, but it's hard to get kids out of high school, Chris. And so I agree with you. They're a sleeping giant if they can make it all work. The problem is they just haven't made it work like you would think they could. Already got that one. What do you think if Art reached out to the MEAC? Russell, no one's touching Art Browse anymore. I'm just telling you. I don't think Art Browse isn't going nowhere, man. North Dakota State could compete with the Big Ten. I think they have always beat a few. They have when they can get them scheduled. Edwin Moore, what's up, Blue? I'm checking you on the way home from work. Go Jags, man! Shout out to you, Edwin, man. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, the DB from Fayetteville State's another one that should get drafted. I saw him at the Senior Bowl. He looked like a stud, so I like that one. Do the USFL and XFL help the FCS talent get even better with more leagues that kids can try for post college? Yeah, I mean, it's good for, it's good for FCS, HBCU athletes, everything to have more leagues. It gives you more options. There's only 55 spots in a practice squad in the NFL. So now you're going to have a bunch of USFL teams, XFL teams. You still have the Canadian Football League. You have options now. And so I think it definitely helps. Like, I'm interviewing a kid from Delaware on later this week. I'll probably drop next week. NFL prospect from Delaware, multiple time All-American, and he got drafted in the USFL this past weekend. And if he gets drafted to the NFL, he'll have a decision to make, but he's going to go to the USFL if he doesn't get drafted. And I think that is amazing that kids are getting a shot to play. And it really comes down to this, Dave, is the fan support. Are you going to go support your favorite players? And that's a question you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, because everyone can say, oh, let's support HBCUs, let's support FCS. But if you aren't turning on the games, if you aren't buying the merchandise, if you aren't following them on social media and helping them promote themselves and buying the merchandise and things like that, how can you say you care about the FCS or HBCU talent if you're not taking time out of your day to support it? And that's the thing that kind of gets me worked up is that, people are like, well, why didn't this person do this? Or, why is this happening? But then they're not taking the steps to help change it. And so for me is like, yes, the USFL and XFL is great because kids are going to get opportunity. But if the people watching this show and the people watching all these other shows and the people in the stands rooting for them at whatever school they're at, if they don't follow that player or the group of players that went to the USFL or XFL and don't watch, then that league's going to fail. Just like the AAF or whatever got started a few years back. If you don't watch it or you look at it as second class football, like a lot of people do, and a lot of people said when all these other leagues were starting, then it's not going to work, Dave. And so I think that's the big question is, yes, it's great for these players so they get opportunity, but make sure you're tuned into those games in the spring while they're going on. Because if you don't watch and those players aren't making the money and getting the exposure that they should, then it really ultimately doesn't matter at the end of the day, man. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is if you're going to say this is great and you're going to be supporting, and I see a lot of accounts right now posting this guy got drafted by like USFL, this guy got drafted by whatever, but are you gonna be supporting that player when he makes a big play? Are you going to be watching when they play on Sunday in April? Are you going to be watching on a Saturday in February or March when the XFL starts next year? That's my question. For a lot of people is, yes, it's good, but are you going to support the product on the field? I hope that Texas State Stadium plan goes through. I haven't heard about that, Jahari. So let me know. Are they looking to build an on-campus stadium? That's exactly what hurts our HBCUs with recruitment, which also hurts our budgets because players want to feel like they have a chance to be high draft picks. I agree. Because if no one's getting drafted, then if no one's getting drafted, then why would you go to that school? I mean, people aren't going to Alabama because they're not getting. I mean, you're almost guaranteed to be a draft pick from Alabama. I mean, there were players in the fifth and sixth round because I'm a psychopath that watches that because I cover it. But there were people being drafted in the fifth or sixth round for Bama that barely played, and they just got drafted because they went to Bama. So I mean, that's the thing is like if HBCU players start getting drafted this year, man, I think you're going to see a big change, CB. So I agree. Houston deserves a coach to match their cities. Some don't like it, but respond to celebrities. Maybe, man. Um, I don't know. I think the coach they have is doing a nice job. I mean, I thought last year they took a big step forward. They shocked Southern. They pulled off. They had some solid games where they had a chance to win, even against Jackson State. But we'll see, man. I think a celebrity coach could do wonders in a big city. Ohio State also recruits Houston and the rest of Texas. Every big program, man. Like you said, yeah, every Power Five is pulling out of Texas. Auburn landed like 4 or 5 guys too. Michigan's got kids from Texas. Washington, Oregon, USC. Everyone's pulling from Texas. TSU plays at the PRI Soccer Stadium. Yeah, I knew that. But I was wondering about the stadium that. Well, Los J said they're not building a stadium. I talked to my people yesterday. That's in. So, Los J was the plan to build an on-campus stadium. If y'all want, y'all can call in and we can talk about this instead of going through chat. But I'm interested to see what the plan was, even though they knocked it down. How big of a stadium should JSU be looking for? Same question for MVSU. MVSU, I don't think has to be very big. Jahari. MVSU has to like Chris said below. You got to focus on a field first, man. Get a nice field, but you're not. I mean. Maybe for Valley, I mean, no more than 10,000, right? I mean, it can't be more than 10,000. I know that sounds harsh, but I mean, you're not pulling a lot of people over there in Itabena to come to games. It can't be more than 10K. It can't. And I would even aim for maybe even 8. Probably an 8K stadium, which is average for FCS, but I think 8K for Valley is probably the limit if I had to guess. I mean, there was even when Jackson came there wasn't anybody there. I can't see that being a big thing for Jackson State. And oh man, for this is going to be tough. And I talked to Sonic Boom C98, who's sometimes in the chat about this. For me, I think I know. Listen, I understand. Y'all can put 65K in the stands for a few games. Big games, big. The Soul Bowl, the Boombox Classic, everything like that. Um, I I would say I would make it 50K, Jahari, because I think 50K in a constant sellout or 45K in a constant sellout is better than what we saw last year with Delta State, where that stadium was like damn near empty. And then you sell it out for the Soul Bowl for 65K like once or twice a year. So I think 45 to 50K would be good with some room to expand if things start rolling with Coach Prime and everything like that. But the number one thing I want to see for Jackson State, Jahari, is bring it closer to the field. I was looking at some pictures and I was looking at some things. It seems like, and I'm trying to explain this the best I can over this medium, but it seemed like it seems like the stands are kind of far away from the field, so it ruins your home field advantage. I would like the stadium to be built more like tight on the field and built up and out, kind of like a Kansas State or like a Florida stadium, a smaller Florida stadium, of course, where the crowd is more involved in the game. Like you don't feel like you're watching from away. Like that's the biggest thing for A&M. They had like grass, a track, the sidelines, and then there was the field. Like I felt I was sitting in probably the 10th or 11th row at the Alabama A&M Jackson State game. I felt like I needed a binocular to see the game. Like it doesn't make any sense how far away from the field you are. Like when I go to an Auburn game, like if you're on the front row at an Auburn game, you can almost like touch the players. You're so close. I mean, you're right there. And so I think that's what Jackson needs to do is make sure that stadium is built tight together because that's how you get the home field advantage. That's why Oregon only has like 45K, a 45K stadium, and it's one of the loudest in college football because of the way they built it right there on the field, and everything funnels into the field and it's built into the ground. And so I think building it into the ground and building it tighter would be really good. And I think when you set it at 50K, selling out every week or having a more full stadium every week really helps. But I get it. You want to have the 65K stadium for the big classics. I got you. But for me, if I'm planning it, I think 55K is the max. Let's see. Did the USFL draft the same players that the NFL will be drafting? Not to I think there were some borderline people that got drafted, but I don't think I don't think they drafted in the top players. So I think now you can opt out potentially Edwin, but they didn't, of course they didn't draft like Matt Corral or anybody like that. I think it was a mix of players that they knew were going to play and ones that were borderline just to give them an option. So I think that was kind of the strategy for the USFL. Texas Southern not building a stadium. Oh yeah, I've already looked at that. Michael Strahan is a Texas Southern alum. Texas Southern needs to get him more involved with the university. Same with MVSU. They need Jerry Rice to get involved more. I agree with you on that one, man. MVSU 10,000 and make it expandable. I can see that. I always wondered how did Jack State build a massive stadium compared to other SWAC schools? Do they have a plan for something? I think I think the city technically built it, Dave, and I think it's used for other stuff like concerts and things like that. I don't think it was just for the football. It's not like the Fargo Dome. Why would TSU build a stadium when you have no overhead cost? You just show up and play. 30-year lease for $1 million. You have your own locker room. Fair enough. 30 to 40K for Jackson State. And quality of coaching in the SWAC has to evolve to maximize and develop the talent of 4- and 5-star recruits. Not going to argue with you there, man. I think it's going that way, Mr. G. I think you're seeing better and better coaching coming into the SWAC. If they did 50K, they'd need a hill for overflow. Yeah, that's true. Also, I mean, so looking at it from a financial perspective for me, if you make it 55K, you could make more money from those games because then the tickets would go up and the exclusive, like it'd be like an exclusive ticket. Like, yeah, Auburn. So, like, this is a bad example because it's a bigger stadium, but like Auburn is at like 56, 57K, maybe 80, no, 88K. My bad, 80. I'm saying the wrong words here, thinking about the wrong thing. It's like 88K. In the Iron Bowl, they could probably sell at a 100K stadium easily, but the exclusivity makes the ticket prices go up, and then you make a bigger profit off of that, and it's just like packed to the brim, and it helps the environment. But I get it. I mean, I think the fans want to be there. I don't know how much you could charge for a ticket. We'll see. Like the Alabama State Stadium. Exactly. Would the Montana model work just enough to fill each game? Possibly. That's where I was kind of going with that, Charlie, is like just having enough to fill the stadium would be, I think, really good for Jackson State because it would look good on TV to have the stadium filled every weekend. The environment would be raucous. And I mean, that's why. Listen, that is why Montana has such a damn good environment, man. Listen, that's again, Montana State, and the Fargo Dome are like some of the top three other FCS stadiums I want to knock out. Of course, outside of all my SWAC stadiums, man, I got to go see some of those games, man, because those fans are crazy. I mean, if you go, excuse me, if you go watch the highlights of the South Dakota State Montana State game, it's snowing. It's like 5 degrees, and man, it is packed. Like just packed out, and everyone's going just buck wild. And I'm like, how are y'all doing that? And I mean that fan base is different. I played at Memorial Stadium in 1978. The stadium is old. I think Mississippi State used to play games there too. I believe so. It was used for a lot of different things. Clarence. So yeah, I think you're right. I think there it's kind of like Legion Field in Birmingham a little bit. Clarence and Dave talking about this. I think it's a little bit like Legion Field where a lot of different events and different teams have used it. How do you feel about Tennessee State going into 2022? What would be considered a successful season for them? Uh, with all the losses that the OVC experienced, I really do think if Tennessee State can develop their offense just a little bit more and get a bit more consistent in big games, Chris, I really do think Tennessee State has a chance to shock a lot of people and win the OVC. I really, really do think that Tennessee State can be an OVC contender this year. I know that's a bit of a stretch. I think they finished third last year, but then there were some really, really good teams in the OVC last year. But you've seen some of those top teams move on to other conferences. Jacksonville State moving to the ASUN, moving up to the FBS now. I think is there. I think you give Eddie George another year to recruit. Their recruiting was pretty solid. They got some real talent coming back. Replacing Jeremy Hickbottom is going to be important. But they pulled off some major upsets. Murray State last year was a giant win for that program. And so I think if Eddie George can continue the momentum they had at the end of the season, they were one game away from, I think, almost winning the OVC last year. Tennessee State's going to be just fine, Chris. I really do think they have a good chance to possibly win the OVC next year. I think that's their ceiling. And I think a successful season would be anywhere between, probably about second place in the OVC, a potential at large bid to the FCS playoffs, even too, depending on how their out of conference goes. Like if they can beat like a Jackson State, man, go ahead and write that ticket. Jackson State is playing in Mississippi Veterans Memorial Stadium. Before they built their own basketball facility, they played in Mississippi's Coliseum. Okay, man, appreciate the insight, Edwin. Appreciate the insight there. Building from the ground up will definitely control home field advantage. I agree. And, I haven't, I mean, I've been to the city of Jackson. I haven't been to a Jackson State game yet just because I didn't live down the South last season. I was still up in Kansas. But, I think based on the feedback from Jackson State fans, a lot of them want to see an on campus or like closer to campus stadium. So I don't know the layout of Jackson off the top of my head. Maybe someone can call in and give me some insight on what y'all want to see Jackson State Stadium look like. But I think on campus stadiums are important. I've mentioned this a million times on this show. I hate off campus stadiums. I hate playing at a stadium that is not yours. I think it kills your home field advantage. I think it takes the energy out of the stadium. If you don't have an on campus stadium that is yours and that your fans feel like, because and the best way to explain it for me, because I was an Auburn grad, I feel like a connection to Jordan Hare. Like when I see Jordan Hare, I get goosebumps just seeing the stadium. Like I went to college there, I got great memories there. You need that for like your at home stadium. Like you want to feel connected, but if you're playing in an NFL stadium or playing in a neutral site game or something like that, like Tennessee State, how do you feel connected to a stadium that isn't yours? It's always confused me. So I know it's a real weird thing to try to explain, but I really like on-campus stadiums that are yours and that your fans can become connected to, and that's what helps create a great home field advantage. FCS needs to compete with the cameras the FBS has. I love those wire cameras you see zipping around at different angles. Some games barely above a high school broadcast. Sadly, man, you're preaching to the choir here, man. I agree, but I think we both know until the FCS starts getting the respect it deserves, you're not going to see that. And I don't even know how. I don't even think they had it for the FCS championship game, or the celebration. I mean, the FCS, and I've said this, has to become better connected. All the conferences have to work together. You have to vouch for yourself, and you have to help yourself out eventually on getting what you deserve. So I agree. The camera and broadcast quality's got to step up for the FCS as a whole. Most HBCU stadiums share it with a running track. Yeah, and I know it, funding is hard to get to separate those things, but I'm just thinking about in terms of how to make your environment even better on game days. And before JSU played on campus, before the Mississippi Coliseum. Okay, man, appreciate that, JSU Tigers. Did the OVC combine their football with the Big South? So it won't be this year, Clarence. It's going to be in 2023. So yeah, it's pretty much like a scheduling alliance, um, similar to what the who I'm blanking on the names. The ASUN and WAC did this year. They pretty much did it to keep their playoff bid to expand it to like 9 teams as we're sitting right now, Clarence. So yeah, that they did it as a scheduling thing. It goes into effect in 2023. Ole Miss Valley concerts, high school playoffs, battle of the bands, all of you's Veterans Memorial. Oh man, appreciate that. Appreciate the insight on that. So yeah, so the Veterans Memorial has been used for everything pretty much. How do you feel about the SWAC considering having more teams in the FCS playoffs? Man, y'all are gonna get me like roasted. Like Mr. Ford's gonna call in and just rip me. Mr. Campbell's gonna rip me one. But man, I've always been a proponent of it. I think, I know the Celebration Bowl is a thing, and it's for the money and it's for the views and all that. Like I get all the positives, and I've kind of shifted my mindset about this. It kind of changed my tune as I've become more educated. My SWAC hours have gone up. My FCS hours have gone up. I understand the drawbacks of the playoff for the SWAC. I understand the benefits of the Celebration Bowl, but just the football fan in me and the football like purist in me, it really kills me that the SWAC doesn't have more representation in the playoffs, because it's hard to make comparisons because the SWAC's not playing in the playoffs, and then I got people commenting like, "Well, how would JSU do against NDSU? How would FAMU do against ETSU? How would they do against Kennesaw State? How would they do against Montana State, Montana?" And it's hard to make those comparisons because they don't play those out of conference games due to travel and money and things like that, and the classics. But then also they're not in the playoffs, and so for me, I would like to see more representation. It's just hard because without the at-large bid, you're not guaranteed a team in there, and then you're going to have the perfect recipe where it's a loose bubble on the outside of the playoffs, and then FAMU can slip in because they had a great season. And so you're going to have everything go right for your second, or really your third place team, because the top 2 teams in the SWAC from each or the top team from each division from the SWAC's got to go to the SWAC championship, which is the week the playoffs start. And so you're sending your third team to the playoffs every year, and odds are your third best team isn't winning a national title. I think we can all agree going into the playoffs last year, Jackson State would have fared better in the playoffs than FAMU did. And I don't think that's a controversial statement. I don't think that's out of the out of my mind saying that Jackson State would have had a better playoff run than FAMU did, or a better showing in the first round than FAMU did, depending on who Jackson State got matched up with, which is still probably Southeastern Louisiana. And so what I think it does is just it's like not putting your best foot forward in terms of the national perspective. So, if Jackson State goes in there and beats Southeastern, that makes the SWAC look good as a whole. But you send your third best team, people, FCS fans or fans watching aren't educated. They see FAMU get mollywopped by Southeastern, and now the perception of the SWAC is lessened. And so I think it's hurting the SWAC that they can't send their best teams to the playoffs. I understand why they can't though, and so we'll just leave it at that. As I get it, but the competitor in me and the football purist in me would love to see it eventually more SWAC teams in the playoffs. I wish the SWAC would make more classics home and home. I agree. Listen, I get it. I understand it's the Orange Blossom Classic in Miami. It's a spectacle, but how amazing would that game be in Bragg and or veterans or whatever or Veterans Memorial? How great would that game be as a home and home for FAMU and Jackson State? That game would be berserk in Bragg and Veterans Memorial. So I would love to see more home and home SWAC Classic games. I don't like the Birmingham thing. I get it. The SWAC commissioner came out, gave all the numbers, but I still would like to see Southern and Jackson State play a home and home rather than going to play a neutral site. JSU is unique with being off campus at Veterans Memorial. It's so we all see it as their stadium. That's okay. So y'all have played there long enough that I can see the connection. That makes sense, Edwin. JSU Stadium is on valuable property that the states want to build a research facility. Interesting. Okay. I did not know that. Auburn was tired of having to play Alabama's big game stadium, Legion, so they made it their own stadium bigger. I'm pretty sure 5 SEC schools have secondary stadiums for big games back in the day. They definitely do. There's a few that have that. So yeah, you're right. You're right there, Jahari. Montana and the Big Sky should make a deal to play those great schools regularly. Would help in so many ways. Yeah, but Mr. Campbell says, man, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. So Montana State, and some of those Big Sky schools are going to have to do home and homes, and I don't know if that's gonna happen right now. And I know the schedules are made out for a long time, but I would like to see in the future, even the distant future, that those home and home series happen. JSU will be getting Walter Payton tribute football uniforms. Hmm. JSU Tigers, have there been any like sneak peeks of what they're going to look like, or any idea? Because I'm interested to see. So are they just going to be throwbacks, or are they just going to have like a special patch or something? JSU, let me know. I'm interested to see. How do you feel about the FCS playoffs having an equal conference fund and a performance fund like the men's basketball tournament? Um, I mean, I don't think it. I think that would improve a lot of things, Lawrence. I think overall, like anything that is, because everybody in the FCS is pressed for like money. I know HBCUs have it a little bit differently at the academic level and the state level, but in terms of like revenue and stuff, a lot of FCS programs struggle. So I think it would help, Lawrence. Anything to help increase the revenue and things like that for these schools, I think it's a good thing. So I wouldn't mind that. I don't know why they don't have that though. I'd like to hear why they don't have that. I want to get a statement on that. I agree. JSU would have handled Southeastern Louisiana a lot better than FAMU. JSU does better playing to their strength in big time games. Not saying they would have won. Yeah, I don't know if they would have won, Chris, but I don't. I don't think they would have gotten beat like that. I think offensively they probably could have put up some points. I still think defensively they would have struggled with Cole Kelly. I mean, let's just keep it honest. Everyone struggled with Cole Kelly throughout his whole career. Nobody shut Cole Kelly down. So that wasn't happening. But I think it would have been a better game. Let's see. I wish the MEAC and SWAC would consider doing more home and home games other than the Celebration Bowl. That's the one game of the year. I can give more exposure to both conferences. Well, I mean, they had the MEAC SWAC Challenge. South Carolina State played FAMU last year too. I think they're playing Bethune this year, and they play Jackson State next year. So I think you're seeing that. I just think uh, they're probably going to hesitate to schedule too many though, because they don't want to see repeat matchups in the Celebration Bowl. They probably want novel games or like unique games in the Celebration Bowl. That's probably why you don't see as many. But I mean, in my opinion, they do a good job of it. I mean, at least South Carolina State does. They play multiple SWAC teams a year. NCAA should subsidize the SWAC Big Sky game. I love the idea, man. Listen, I love it. Um, I see FAMU calls this FCS attention because JSU eliminated them from the Celebration Bowl. For class against over FCS, whose team they're not familiar with financially. I think financially the FCS playoffs loses money. No, it okay. So Clarence, it definitely loses money, and that's why I say I understand it. For me, when I say I would like to see it, it's because it's like I said, it's a competition thing for me. But I understand financially why it doesn't happen, and I would like to see what I want to see. I don't know when they release it or if it's public info already. I would like to see what FAMU's cost was to go play Southeastern. I'd be very interested in that. So if any FAMU fans are in here can let me know where to find that information, or if it's even out yet, let me know because I would be interested to see what it cost them to go to the playoffs this year. Blue, did you get a sense of who the NFL scouts were looking at the HBC Legacy Bowl? Did you speak to any scouts? Yeah. So I spoke to a few. So for me, what I looked at, they're really looking at Akil Glass, man. Akil Glass after every single practice, after every meeting, everything was talking to an NFL scout. His agent was all over the place. Akil Glass was getting looked at up and down at the HBCU Legacy Bowl game. Also, the guy I'm going to have on tomorrow is dropping tomorrow. Dejean Dixon for Norfolk State, man. There was a scout. The coach even said it on the field. They took him off the field during scrimmages because the offensive line just could not block him. And he had a big game on Saturday as well. When it all came down to it, I mean, he speaks in the interview just to kind of give you like a little sneak peek of what's dropping tomorrow. He talks about in the game that he was getting like double teamed and chipped in an all-star game, and he was like, "What is going on here?" He was like, "How am I getting double teamed in an all-star game?" And that's how dominant he was. So I think he was getting a lot of looks. Like I said at the combine too, man, and the Legacy Bowl game, Marquise McLean. Scouts are just don't understand how he's built the way he is. I mean, that guy is a unit. And I really think he showed his ball skills really well, his route running throughout the week. So I think those are some guys that were really turning scouts' heads at the HBCU Legacy Bowl. Veterans Memorial Stadium became the home for JSU in 1970. They now own it. They purchased it in 2011. Appreciate that info, Mr. G. Appreciate that. So that puts that to rest. The SWAC should do a challenge week with another conference. Man, listen, man, I released an episode like last year screaming about that. I got pushed back on it, man. So I don't know how I got pushed back on it, but I think that's amazing. I know Coach Simmons too has been talking about that on YouTube a lot. We all know FAMU did handle South Carolina better than Coach Prime didn't like the layout. He wanted no sneak. Fair enough. That's how it usually plays out. Southern and JSU will return to home and home after 2 years of not being a conference game, making it a class. It just keeps the rivalry on our schedules a non-conference game. Makes sense, Edwin. Makes sense. Man, Kendrick, you missed a lot, man. We missed a lot. We're just doing random questions now, kind of talking about the playoffs right now and some of the SWAC topics. Do you have any idea of how much revenue Coach Prime and JSU football brought in 2021? Not for the university. I know it was some like millions of dollars for the city of Jackson. So I can only imagine what it brought in for the program. I do not know how much revenue they brought in for like the university or the football program right now off the top of my head, but I'll try to get those numbers for you by the next mailbag next week. Which SWAC school do you think has the best chance for an FCS playoff berth? They don't make it to the SWAC title game. I think I think whoever loses or don't win the division between Jackson State and FAMU has a great chance. If there's a 1 to 2 loss team with FAMU or Jackson State, I think they have a great shot. I think Alabama A&M, if they can win 2 of their first 4 games and get out with like just a loss to Jackson, I think a 3-loss Alabama A&M potentially could get in. I think Southern probably can't get in with their strength of schedule. I'm going to be honest. I think even if they don't win their division, I think they're screwed. maybe Alcorn or Grambling, maybe, but I think your best options are either Alabama, either FAMU or Jackson State, the loser of that first game or the loser of the division, and then maybe Alabama A&M if their cards fall right. I think those are probably the only SWAC schools that have a realistic shot this year to get into the FCS playoffs just based off of strength of schedule. I see Alcorn. They got a real tough game week 1 against Stephen F. Austin. Their strength of schedule could possibly be there, but I don't think Southern's going to have the strength of schedule to get in if they don't win the SWAC or win their division. Which SWAC team besides FAMU can handle the MEAC? I don't know about that one, man. We'll have to see. Glass's arm is NFL, but like Troy A, man, he needs to be behind a good offensive line. I agree, and I think it was tough because the Legacy Bowl, the offensive line for Team Robinson didn't play well during the game. I think you guys saw that. I mean, they got handled up front when it really came down to it. But luckily during the week, I think Akil proved enough where scouts are still looking at him. And so I agree. He's going to have an offensive line because the lack of mobility, in my opinion, really, really hurts him. And he just can't get out of the pocket, man. I think he's trying to make decisions and the pocket's collapsing. The pocket's collapsing around him and he just can't get away. So I think that does hurt him a little bit. Let's say FAMU goes 9-2 again, second behind JSU in the fall. Should the FCS playoff committee consider FAMU despite getting blown out? Listen, and I know EA down here saying the loss in the playoffs is going to limit any HBCU making the FCS playoffs. I don't think so because I mean, so I don't know I don't know who in the chat. I don't know who in the chat has kind of watched a lot of FCS football in terms of playoffs because I know a lot of people that really aren't invested in it in the SWAC, but there are multiple teams that get blown out every year, like multiple teams. Like the Southland teams get massacred. Like what happened to Southeastern against James Madison is usually what happens in like the first or second round, and multiple teams like the Pioneer League and some of these other teams that just get like boat raced every single year and they still get in. Like Mercer would get wrecked in the playoffs and they almost made it. And so I don't think that's the case, man. I think there's a lot of teams. There's some SoCon teams that have been just blitzed in the playoffs, and the playoff committee understands it because the Big Sky and Missouri Valley teams and James Madison literally are just above the rest right now. And so I really don't think it's going to affect the conference's ability to get a team in because if that was the case, there would be 2 Southland teams and there would never be, more than one like SoCon team in there. Like there's OVC, there are some conferences that have horrible like histories in the FCS playoffs. So I don't agree that it's going to hurt anybody. The city said they profited 30 million. Yeah, so I would imagine that the school profit was outrageous. Blue, how do you feel about Texas Southern strength of schedule? Let me pull up Texas Southern's schedule here. Let's see. So I don't know it off the top of my head. 2022 football schedule. So let's see. They got they got at Prairie View, at North Texas, at Southern, at UT. Man, you got four away games in the first 4 weeks. That is brutal. And then you got Alabama State at home, at UAPB, at Alcorn versus Lincoln University, versus Jackson State, versus Grambling State, versus Alabama A&M. It's okay. I think it's going to be tough for Texas Southern. I mean, at PV, at North Texas, at Southern, and at UTSA, and then at UAPB in week 6. I mean, and then at Alcorn after that. I mean, you only have one home game. Like your second home game isn't until October 29th. That is going to be that's going to be brutal. So I think it's a tough schedule. And then after Lincoln, you got Jackson State, Grambling, and Alabama A&M. So I mean, if you don't get wins on the front end, if you're Texas Southern, I find it hard pressed that it's going to be a great year for Texas Southern. Los J, that we're going to find out what Texas Southern has immediately, and I don't know how they got stuck with all those away games. That is brutal. Let's see, Yusuf, you're going to the JSU Pro Day later this month. I am going to try. I don't remember if they opened it to the media though, or like independent media like us. As you know, for some reason, I got labeled as a Jackson State hater along the way. I don't know how that exactly happened. But yes, I'm going to try to be at the Jackson State Pro Day later this month and get y'all some awesome content from there. I agree, Blue. FAMU, JSU, Alabama A&M, Southern and GSU can't play. Yeah, the Bayou Classic. I totally blanked on that. Yeah, so it's really FAMU, JSU, Alabama A&M. Those are the only three that I think have a shot. Bottom line, it's about kids learning and making America a better place. This national rivals will make them brothers. Go SWAC versus Big Sky, B-ball, gridiron, track, softball. We want to see them all. I like it. Listen, I like the idea. A SWAC versus Big Sky challenge, I'm all for. Sign me up at whatever year that needs to happen. I would like to see it. Other schools got blown out, not FAMU. Yeah, it's common. Yeah, Sam Houston got skull drugged by Montana State, so it happens. But it would be nice if that Grambling State versus JSU game would be in New Orleans. It'll be on ESPN2 for sure. Yeah, I think it's already scheduled to be on ESPN2. So it would be cool to be at a big neutral site. But like I've said, I'm all for home and home. So I'm kind of glad it's at one of the places, in my opinion. Let's be honest, no HBCU compete with the top tier FCS schools. Maybe not right now, man, but they're on their way. I'm definitely going to go to a PV game this year. Texas Southern's first 4 weeks is going to be tough. They could get on the roll at the end. Man, if they get that momentum rolling, they're going to have to pull some big upsets, I think, to make an impact on, in terms of record. But I really like that they went out there and challenged themselves. They got some tough games. I mean, UTSA is not going to be an easy game. That was a ranked team all last year. Who do you have coming out of the SWAC West? If I had to put money on it right now, man, I'm going to say Grambling still coming out of the SWAC West. I just got too many questions about the other teams right now. I think Halloween, I'm putting my money on Halloween. If Halloween develops like I think, I feel real confident about that Grambling pick. If he doesn't live up to the hype, which is always possible with guys you haven't seen play in a while, and so I'm going to go with Grambling. I think Southern could be there. I have questions about that quarterback spot and also replacing some of the wide receivers they lost, like a McLean. Alcorn replacing Felix Harper is going to be very, very tough. And so I'm going to ride with Grambling right now. If I had to put my money on March 1st, I'm in Virginia. I watched CAA, Big South this season. JMU has been the best football in Virginia, including UVA and Tech. I'll agree with that, man. That those programs have not been good. I know Virginia hired Tony Elliott. I'm interested to see how that hire worked. And I think Virginia Tech hired the guy from Penn State. I think it's Brent Ply or something like that. So I'm excited to see how those programs might turn around. But I agree. Right now, JMU has had the history on their side recently. Texas Southern success will depend on how good their defense improves. I agree. They couldn't stop anybody last year. They couldn't stop a nosebleed. I mean, that defense got torn apart. That Alabama A&M game was theirs to win. Andrew Body put on a stupid performance. That running game was clicking, and they just couldn't stop a kill glass when it mattered most. Any word on what the next move is for the OC? None right now, Chris, man. Everything's kept in-house. They haven't even made a statement on Art Briles stepping down yet. So I'm not really sure what's next for Grambling, but I'm assuming they're probably going to keep this OC hire very under wraps, Chris, until it's time to announce. I don't think they want to face any backlash, any public, any public scrutiny on this OC hire. Yeah, I got labeled by a hater, man. And like Mr. G said, it's probably because I rock with my guy Scotty, but it's all good, man. Over here, man, we just talk football, man. We just talk football, so it is what it is. Grambling versus JSU is in New York City as we used to. That would be interesting. I still, I don't know. I still like that game home and home, but I mean, New York as a neutral site would be wild to see that. So I don't mind that, but I'm still a home and home guy at heart. Texas Southern could be the dark horse in the West. They lost 3 starters on offense, and they're installing a new defense. Yeah, I mean, I think Los J, if I had to look at it, I mean, the running back spot's probably solidified, I would imagine, for Texas Southern. You got Andrew Body coming back. I think it's just wide receivers. You lost Giles and some other guys. You got to get some weapons around Andrew Body, and that offensive line has to it has got to get better. I mean, really and truly, you got to protect Andrew Body, as athletic as he is. If that improves, that offense could probably be one of the best in the SWAC. But like you said, the defense you have to improve. I mean, outside of Alabama A&M, man, that defense was atrocious at times. I mean, could not stop anybody. I think there would be a few more upsets if that defense could make a few stops, because Texas Southern's strategy last year was we got to turn it into a shootout, and we just got to hope we score more points than you at the end of the game. That was their strategy completely. Um, a quick baseball, does NCAA require baseball players to be enrolled in all 3 semesters with the season running into the summer? I'm not sure, EA. I think so. So what I've come to, because I took summer classes too, and usually athletes, all athletes, EA, or at least at Power Five schools. I'll say this: Power Five schools. I don't know about FCS because of the money and things like that. Athletes for football were enrolled in all 3 semesters. Like if you were an athlete, basketball players, football players, everything, all those guys were in my summer classes. Like I had a lot of classes with athletes in the summer because all of them took classes during the summer. So I do think I don't know if it requires it, but I know that all athletes that are on campus are in classes all 3 semesters, at least in my experience at Auburn. EA. I don't know about the FCS schools. Grambling definitely needs to come back to New York City. Maybe it happens. I don't know. With the SWAC expanding, I would imagine to see more big games and classes come about. I'm going to do research on the upcoming college football TV deals. FCS playoff games can be shown on ESPN, ESPN2, and ESPNU. FCS TV viewership are up. It definitely is. I thought, you know, I get some of the first round games being on ESPN Plus, but I was very surprised they waited till like the quarterfinals to air a game, and air games on normal TV, and then they still had a game on ESPN Plus. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was Montana State and South Dakota State, or no, I think it was Montana State and Sam Houston. Maybe one of the games was on ESPN Plus anyway in the quarterfinals. So I think I like their strategy that they use, where that there was a game on Friday night, did huge numbers, and then they had a game Saturday. So we'll see. Which FCS team would you like to see do a neutral site game and where? If I got to pick any, Chris, let's see. Well, hang on. North Dakota State versus South Dakota State in the Viking Stadium. That's interesting. I don't think they would do it, Chris, because that's a big rivalry. And man, those stadiums. I mean, listen, South Dakota State, North Dakota State, man, they'll pack out that stadium for that rivalry. But that would be an interesting one because that Viking Stadium's beautiful. I went there for the Final Four in 2019. That stadium is gorgeous, man. So I like that. But if I had to pick, let's see, I'll give you a few. Off the top of my head, I want to see FAMU Kennesaw in Atlanta. I think FAMU versus Kennesaw would be an outstanding game. Atlanta's right there with Kennesaw, so they'd have a bunch of fans show up. FAMU's got a big alumni base in Atlanta. I think they could sell out, not sell out, but they could pack out the Mercedes Benz to a good level. Um, I you know I it not this year, but I think in like 2023, 2024, Jackson State, North Dakota State, and like Kansas City would be huge, or Chicago or something like that. Kind of put it somewhere in the middle where both fan bases have to travel. KC is technically in the middle of everything, so KC would be interesting. I would love to see that game. And I would love to see, and this is going to be an interesting one for some people. I would love to see Eastern Washington versus Alabama A&M. Those are two always explosive offenses, some great offensive minds on those coaching staffs. I think that game would be an absolute shootout, and people would love to watch it. So I don't know where you would put it, but I think Eastern Washington, Alabama A&M would be another non-conference game or like a non-conference neutral site game that I would like to see. I don't know where you would put it because that's really hard to find maybe somewhere in Texas, but it's still like with Eastern Washington, they're like all the way up in Washington. So anywhere is going to be a travel for them. But I would like to see that just stylistic matchup. Um, let's see. How do you feel about the Bama State coach doing this year? I really was tough on the hire. I'm not gonna lie. I really questioned the like vetting process and why that direction when there was so much energy behind SWAC football HBCUs that I felt like you kind of had your choice of a lot of great coaches. So I was like, how did you come to this guy with no experience? But he's done an excellent job recruiting. He hired the Bowie State defensive coordinator today. I thought that was an amazing hire. I talked to Scotty and some people who know a bit more about D2 football. They said it was a great hire. And so I really do like. I don't know if it's a big upgrade over Travis Pearson per se, but I do think it's going to fit that style that they're going to put. So I think he's done better stepping into the role than I thought he would. Now I want to see if that translates to on the field, but I think right now he's done a solid job compared to the reserves that I had about him coming into the season. Nah, keep GSU and JSU home and home. Maybe move if you want to keep it on the schedule when it isn't a conference game for 2 years. That's an option. Uh, Speaking of Auburn, how do you think they'll do this year? James, this is going to be a tough year. Listen, we're a basketball school now. It's going to be a tough year. I think Tank Bigsby coming back is a big deal, but Colby Wooded on the defensive line is going to be a stud. You got some major losses in the secondary with Smoke Monday and Roger McCreary. You've returned 4 of the 5 offensive linemen, which is a big deal at Auburn. But now you still got the quarterback question. TJ Finley didn't like he was going to be it. Kenzout Calzada or maybe freshman Holden Griner or even redshirt freshman Demetrius Davis step in. I think that quarterback battle is going to be the biggest deciding factor on how Auburn will do and how is the recruiting going to be impacted by just the ridiculous reports out of Auburn almost firing Harsin just a few weeks ago. I think Auburn's in a very tumultuous place right now, a very precarious situation right now, James. So my expectations are not very high right now. Let's see. I would like to see North Dakota. Okay. Any neutral site game in Atlanta or Dallas are big wins. I agree. They used to have the Atlanta Football Classic. FAMU Kennesaw would be great. That they need to do it again, man. I know some FAMU fans are on board for that. So Kennesaw, pick up the phone. Grambling is a national brand. They had a national weekly TV show like Notre Dame in the 60s. That's interesting. Man, the media coverage for the SWAC still got to improve. So I would like to see some national weekly TV shows. I mean, you pretty much got that right now with Coach Prime, because he's on like the Barstool show. But I like to see more schools be featured. What D2 do you think could get approval going into FCS? What conference will they go to? Um, I'm not, so it's kind of hard to predict D2 schools. Just because I don't know the financial backing of some of these, but I've heard Bowie State, I've heard Valdosta State, Savannah State just recently had a falling out not too long ago, so I can't really say them. West Florida maybe, um, but those are really the only ones I feel comfortable. I don't know what the financial backing is. I know Leon, one of the big supporters of the channel, said he used to play at Valdosta State, I believe, and they're not going to be able to come up. So I think it's tough, man, because the financial backing is the biggest thing. There's some plenty of D2 schools that could probably do it on the field, but the conferences, I think you got to look at the Big South, the OVC, and the Southland would probably be my top 3 choices right now, man, for conferences looking to add D2 schools. And the Southland's already done it, and so is the OVC. So I think you're looking for those conferences potentially adding D2 schools, maybe the MEAC, if they could get some of those D2 HBCUs ready to jump up. Huge fan bases in the Midwest, especially Chicago, Detroit, Cleveland for SWAC schools, especially JSU, Grambling, and Southern. So they would all draw well against anyone in that area. So yeah, so I mean, those are options. NDSU versus JSU in Chicago would be interesting. Maybe Detroit. I think you got a lot of schools up north that would be that would be really good. Crazy to say the Auburn's basketball school, but you're actually right. Listen, Bruce Pearl doing his thing, Kevin, doing his thing. Listen, I might have done it a bit too early. I've already bought my Final Four tickets. So I'm going to be in New Orleans regardless if we're there or not, man. But we've been balling this year, so I like it. What about basketball schools that can host and conference football programs as neutral site? Possibly, Nick. I think that's a good idea. Auburn is in a major mess right now, losing their staff and head coach, having off the field issues. I know, Chris. Listen, we don't want to talk about that, man. FCS tonight. Spare me. I know y'all see the Auburn stuff in the background. Spare me my sorrow with that one. We played Grambling in Tokyo in 1976 and New York in the 70s. Really? I did not know they played in Tokyo. I'll have to look that up. They played in Tokyo? That's wild. When's the last time a college football game? Well, I know there was supposed to be a game in like Dublin with like Notre Dame and Wisconsin or something, but Tokyo, that's crazy. 2 SWAC and 2 Big Sky in a doubleheader anywhere. I like that too. Do you know anything about JSU's offensive coordinator? So I know a little bit. I mean, I know he was an offensive analyst at Nevada. They had a really strong offense out there. Carson Strong was a monster at quarterback out there, but I don't think he has any experience there in calling plays or designing offenses or anything like that. I still think this is going to be a spread attack where you're going to air the ball out more often than not. And I'm really not really sure what to expect. I know there's going to be some different wrinkles, and I think, as crazy as it sounds, even though he doesn't have a lot of play calling experience, I think it helps them against FAMU because now FAMU still doesn't know what to do. Last year, they didn't know what to do because it was a new quarterback, a new system, everything like that, and they had like 11 new starters on offense. Now you got a few new starters, a lot of returning players, but now you might have a whole new scheme. So I think Jackson State is in a really interesting spot, even though it's hard to predict what's going to happen. You know where your strengths are. You're going to have to throw the ball and everything. The key to the game all year. I know some of y'all watch my game previews. The key to the game for Jackson State all year is going to be put the ball in Shador Sanders' hands. That's it. That's going to be the strategy. And I think that's going to be his whole job is to get Shador in positions to make plays, and that's what you got to do. Blue, believe it or not, I think Tennessee State game will be very interesting. I do too, and I know there was the whole the argument. I know there were some people that went back and forth about the schedule, and people were mad and all this kind of stuff. But Tennessee State counts as an out of conference game for me. Tennessee State and Campbell is a great non-conference slate because Tennessee State is not going to be the same Tennessee State they faced last year. Tennessee State is going to compete. Tennessee State is not a bum team. Tennessee State's a legit contender of the OVC, and a win for Jackson State in that game convincingly, it goes a long way, in my opinion, in further solidifying yourself as an FCS contender, I would say. So I agree. I think it's not going to be an easy game. I like Bowie States and the MEAC. They can hold weight, but financially, yeah. You see, that's the tough part is I don't know the financial aspects of a lot of these D2 programs. Are the football rosters going back to FCS 63 scholarships in 2022 post-COVID exemptions? Yes. Scholarship limits, I think, go back either this year or next year. I did an episode. I'll have to link it in the description. I have to remind myself, but I talked about the roster problem for college football, not just FCS, but even FBS. The FBS limit is going back into place when they didn't have it last year. So I think there's going to be, as sad as it is, and everyone's mindset is all these players after spring practice, all these players that get cut are going to come down to FCS. Where's the FCS players going to have room, or the FCS team's going to have room? Are you going to cut your whole roster? I highly doubt it. So I think there's going to be a lot of players without a home for the first season they implement back the limit, because you're going to have some players that thought they had a spot that's not going to have a spot anymore. And so I think it's going to, a lot of coaches have been outspoken that the NCAA needs to ease into this rule and not just put a hard limit immediately. But as we know, the NCAA can't handle anything appropriately. So it's probably going to be chaos, just like you're thinking. Grambling fans don't attend games home and away very well. I can't speak to that, but I mean, I will take your word for it. West Florida is definitely D1 hungry. JSU used to be in Indianapolis. I missed it so much. JSU used to play back in the RCA Dome in Indianapolis. I love going to it. Coach Prime needed to bring it back. I think there's a few teams in Indianapolis that you can meet up with up there. So I'll be interested to see that. Nebraska will be playing in Ireland this year. I can't remember who they'll play off the top of my head. I love it. Look up Tokyo Grambling versus Morgan State. Doug Williams was the quarterback. Okay, I'll look it up after the show. Montana versus Army in Tokyo in 1985. Man, there was like a Tokyo series that I just missed. I know everything about college football, supposedly. I missed that one. JSU and Southern should try New Orleans instead of Birmingham. They've done well there in the past. Maybe, I mean, it's still a home game for Southern, but I think it's more the profit thing because Southern's going to sell out their stadium if they have it at home. But I don't know how the profits would be split if they did it in like the Superdome or anything like that, or like Tulane Stadium or something like that. There's too many colleges in Florida draining the football pool. Are you going to any spring games? So right now, I got to check all my dates and make sure none of them overlap. I want to get to Jackson State spring game. I want to do FAMU spring game, and then I'm probably going to do the two Alabama schools, Alabama State and Alabama A&M. Those are probably the four I'm going to try to keep on my schedule to knock out. I just have to make sure none of them are on the same. Those are the four I want to go to as of right now. When does NCAA football game come back? Next year. I think they said they're going to release it in like July or August of 2023. Is the last thing I heard about that. NCAA can't get things right. I'll move my championship to different networks like hockey, NBC softball, CBS. Possibly. I'll be interested to see. So if this whole movement to break away from the NCAA works, for the FBS, because the FBS is going to break away first. Like, I know there's been some channels out there talking, and some people on like Twitter talking about the SWAC or the FCS breaking away from the NCAA. The FBS is going to have to do it first. The Power Five is probably going to have to be the first ones to do it, just to lay the blueprint, because I don't think financially the FCS can all stand on its own if it just breaks away just out of nowhere. But let's say that eventually happens. I'll be interested to see if the NCAA supports the FCS more if the FBS breaks away, or if the FCS follows the FBS and breaks away completely, and what they do with that. But you're like finances and television exposure are my biggest complaints about the FCS, in my opinion. You got to increase that some way or the other. Like it has to happen, man, because it's really hurting a lot of these schools. And the FCS over the past few years have lost some great teams because they're not making money at this level and going to, like I said, I think it was yesterday at the last live stream. Playing in the Bahamas Bowl as a Sun Belt team is more profitable than playing in the FCS playoffs and being an FCS team. And I know that's shocking, but that's the truth of it. Southeastern Louisiana quarterback, where do you think he'll go in the draft? I think he's probably a 5th or 6th round pick right now, EA. I think someone's going to take a flyer on his size and arm strength and his productivity in college. And I think they're going to try to sit him behind a veteran quarterback and develop him a little bit. And don't rush him into anything. And in a few years, we'll probably see him pop up somewhere, starting a game for an injured quarterback, or a game where the starters sit out for the playoffs. And that's probably where he'll be for the first few years. We SU already go to New Orleans every year. There are a ton of other places to play JSU, if not home at home. Yeah, so I don't. Yeah, that's another thing, is I don't know if Southern would want 2 games in the Superdome, because, like you said, they played the Bayou Classic there. Who is your favorite SWAC player? That's an interesting question, and I got, like, now I'm friends with some of the players, man. So this might be a loaded a loaded question. This is a really good one, because I would say last year, probably my 2 favorite players were Killglass and Bishop Bonnet. I really rocked with both of those guys, and Bishop's a big supporter of the show. I talked to him at the HBCU Legacy Bowl, just off camera, just like me and him catching up. And Akil, man, that's my guy. So I had to go with them too. But now they're both gone. Oh man, this is a really good question. I haven't even thought about this question at all. I would probably have to say I'm a bias because I'm a lineman. I'd probably have to say right now, one of my favorite players right now is General Hunt, man. I think the defensive tackle spot's one that's really overlooked. And I really like Gentle Hunt at the defensive tackle spot. And then my other one, just because it's the offensive lineman in me, I really like Mark Evans, the second, for UAPB at that offensive tackle spot. I think he's the best offensive lineman in the SWAC right now. Um, And for me, I think those two guys are probably the ones I'm going to rock with. And we've had both of them on the show too, but it's just that I personally reached out to them because I mean they're one of my favorite players to watch. I think Gentle Hunt had a crazy performance against Southeastern. Him and Savian ate up that center guard center combo of Southeastern, and then Mark Evans, man, his technique. He's a little bit undersized, but man, he's been a consistent All American up there at UAPB, blocking his you know what off. So I'm gonna go with Mark Evans and Gentle Hunt, and that's because I'm a lineman and I'm kind of biased. Man, shout out to you, man. Thank you for the donation. I really really appreciate that, man. Thank you. Who is the best FCS player for next year? Mm. So it's kind of a weird thing. So you're probably losing the two best players in FCS football, and Eric Berry and Cole Kelly. You're losing them to the NFL draft. I believe Quay Holmes was headed to the NFL, if I'm not mistaken, too. So that's your other finalist. You got your top four finalists for the Buck Buchanan coming back, and Isaiah Land. Or your two of your three, 'cause Troy Anderson's headed out. Pat O'Connell and Justin Ford are all coming back. For offense, though, Mm. I'm gonna have to give it to either Shelley for Missouri State at quarterback or Gibson at Stephen F. Austin at wide receiver. I think those two are probably gonna be my top two choices for the offensive side of the ball right now. I really think Shelley from Missouri State is gonna have a big year at quarterback. Um, and then on defense, I'm gonna go with Justin Ford. I know Isaiah Landis won the Buck Buchanan. Pat O'Connell was a finalist. Justin Ford, man, that kid is a guy who I think can take the Marquise Bell route where his measurables and production are just so high that somebody's gonna have to draft him next year when he comes out. This year, he led the FCS in interceptions, had an 8-game streak of interceptions in a 10-game streak of either a turnover or a defensive touchdown this year. I'll put that in perspective. 10 games in a row, he forced a turnover or had a defensive touchdown. The kid is just all over the field. He can play safety, he can play corner, he can play slot. Justin Ford, in my opinion, I think is going to be the best defensive player in the country next year in the FCS, and it's not even close. And he might be the best overall player, realistically. I mean, that kid is one of a kind. Let's see. JSU and SSU would give Birmingham for free. That's true. All blue, no SU offensive lineman. Listen, I really like Jatari Carter, but he's graduated now. I got to see him at the Senior Bowl, man, and that dude's a monster. So I like Jatari Carter, but no Southern offensive lineman as of right now, man. But they're good as a unit. I mean, that unit of offensive linemen is legit. Marquise Bell is a must-have safety to cover tight ends in the pros. The Pittsburgh Steelers scouts lived in Tallahassee all season. Let's go Steelers. That's man. Whew, man, I just want to put that in perspective. So you're gonna have Minka playing next to Marquise Bell potentially, man. That is a terrifying duo in the back end of your defense. I would love to see Marquise Bell play for that Steelers defense. That defense, and I think his play style really fits in there where it's not like a selfish stat heavy system. You've got the defensive line with Watt that can get after the quarterback. Devin Bush is a hyper athletic linebacker, and then you're going to have Minka and Marquise Bell on the back end. Man, sign me up to watch that duo just um tear up the NFL, man. And with that division, I think that'd be a great pick for them too to shore up their secondary with Lamar, Joe Burrow, and all the talent that they have in that division. I know, I guess you could put Baker in there, probably not anymore, but Baker at one point, maybe rookie year Baker, but I really do like that pick. Um, but man, we're gonna wrap it up here in a minute, man. If y'all want, get y'all's calls in. The call line is still gonna be open for probably 5-10 minutes. Talk about any of your big questions, man. Appreciate y'all rocking with me, man. Past the 2 hour mark. So shout out to y'all, man, for tuning in for this long. Who is your draft still of for the NFL? I've said it for a while. I think, of course, you could throw Christian Watson and some people like that in there, but I think one of a guy who's probably going to slip to the mid to late round, shockingly, and I think he probably has top 2 round talent. And I've talked about him a few times on this channel, man. I've been trying to get him on the show, and I just haven't been able to do that. Is Troy Anderson from Montana State? For that kid to come into Montana State, play quarterback or play running back first, be a first team All American, have like 20 rushing touchdowns in a year at running back spot. Then the next year, be asked to play quarterback, be an All American selection there, and have a huge season at quarterback. And then your junior year and senior year, you got to get moved to middle linebacker and be a Mike linebacker, the leader of the defense. And then you become a Buck Buchanan Award finalist and a first team FCS All American, Big Sky, um, a Big Sky selection too. I mean, that is just absolutely insane to me. So I really do like Troy Anderson as a steal. I think his versatility, his athleticism is exactly what you want in a linebacker today because with the pass heavy schemes, with the running backs like an Alvin Kamara coming out of the backfield, you're going to want a guy that plays well in space, a guy who's really athletic that can play, that can step down and get his hand in the dirt as an edge guy, can play back at the Mike spot, can play box safety ish, cover in the slot. You're going to have him athletic, and his athleticism popped out at the Senior Bowl. So I really do like a steal of the draft being Troy Anderson from Montana State. Let's see, up with Montana, down with the Cats. How many HBC players do you think will get drafted? Oh man, this is always so hard to predict, but off the top of my head, mm, all right, so let's see. I'll give like my for sure's, and then there'll probably be like plus or minus one or two. I'm gonna say Marquise Bell gets drafted from FAMU. The DB from Fayetteville State, I'm blanking on his name for some reason. He'll probably get drafted. I think Akil gets drafted late. I think James Houston gets drafted late. I think Dejean Dixon gets drafted. That's five. Oh man. I think there's going to be either Keenan Forbes or Jatari Carter from Southern get drafted, and there's probably going to be like a D2 player or another D2 player. So I'm going to go with HBCUs in general. I would say 5 to 8 is probably going to be my like conservative prediction on that. So I think 5 to 8 HBCU players should be drafted. And I think that's a big step up from 0 last year for sure. But I think 5 to 8 would be my safe bet range on HBCU players being drafted in this year's draft. I think you got your for sure bets, and then you got some borderline guys who, if a team feels like they're not going to slip to undrafted free agency, are going to pick them up in the 6th, 7th round later in the draft. Or you might have some guys who potentially could be drafted that people think are going to slide back, and then they kind of get overlooked in the process of it all. So I'll go 5 to 8, man, on that. How many from the Big Sky? Oh man, I gotta even think about all the prospects out there, man. I think Daniel Hardy has a really good shot of getting drafted. Charlie, I really like it. I really like him, man. I mean, he was second this year or third this year in sacks in the FCS. I like him coming out of Montana State. Um, hmm, and this is tough. There's probably going to be two or three, man, to be honest, because there's probably going to be an off that Lewis Kidd, too, is a guy I really like at offensive tackle. And then there's probably going to be somebody I'm overlooking off the top of my head in terms of NFL draft ready people. Because I think for FCS players, you got your for sure guys. You got your, guys from the MVC like a Trevor Penning, the Matt kid from North Dakota. I can't pronounce his last name. It starts with a W. He's been an absolute stud. You got your Christian Watsons, probably Cordell Volson. But I think Daniel Hardy is the one I'm really for sure about. Maybe a Mondre Williams, Charlie, at the edge rusher from Montana State too. But the thing with Montana, I think Montana is I think for you, because I know you're a Montana fan, I think next year will be a big year. I think O'Connell will get drafted. I think Justin Ford will be a draft pick. But this year on the offensive side, man, I don't see a lot of people getting drafted from the offensive side of the ball because I mean Eric Barrier probably should be drafted, but he's not going to because of his size. And I think that's the biggest shocker for me for this whole draft process is that Eric Barrier didn't get a NFLPA invite. didn't get an East West Shrine Bowl invite, didn't get a Senior Bowl invite, didn't get a combine invite anywhere. I mean, he just forgot. I mean, people just forgot about him. I don't know how Eric Berrier didn't. He didn't even get looked at. I don't think he got drafted to the USFL. So I don't know what happened there, man. There has to be something behind the scenes that I'm missing. I think that's quite a few. I think that quite a few HBC players will make it as free agents. I agree. If you're counting free agency, I mean, you're probably getting into the double digits, Mr. G. And I think you'll probably be in double digits. Yeah, the great QB from Eastern Washington, Air Barrett, Walter Payton Award winner, probably top 5 quarterback in FCS history, potentially. Yeah, he just got forgot about in the whole draft process. I don't know how. Who do you think should take over the head job at Morgan State? I haven't really looked into that, man. I'm gonna be honest with you. So I'll do some research and I'll bring that as a question on the next mailbag. I'll do some research about who they're looking at, and some qualities I think that they're going to probably need in a head coach to kind of break them down as a program. But off the top of my head, I know I'm pretty sure there's been a lot of talk about Ray Lewis or some. I'm pretty sure I heard on another channel someone was mentioning, uh, excuse me, Ray Lewis as a potential head coach. So I don't know how much smoke that is, but I'll do some research for you, man, on that. You think players that don't get drafted will fall into the XFL, maybe fill in the USFL? Probably. I think you're going to see a weird undrafted a weird like undrafted free agency because you're probably going to have some guys who are going to take their shot on NFL practice squads, camp invites, things like that. Other players are probably going to accept invites to the USFL, the Canadian Football League, things like that. So I think you're going to see a more spread out decision making for a lot of these prospects that don't get drafted. But I would absolutely imagine that some players that don't get drafted will take the opportunity to go to some of these other leagues and maybe earn their way back in, like take the Kurt Warner route where you go play, I think he played what the US the Canadian Football League and then like a little bit of arena and then came back to the NFL and had his career. So I think they'll probably take that route. Flee from JSU, HU alum. That's also an option. But yeah, I'll do some more research in that Morgan State job. I haven't really looked into it. To be honest with you about who should take over that head coaching job, and it's really late in the process too. That's going to be tough. I mean, it's March 1st, and this is not where you want to be sitting without a head coach. But I mean, a lot of people now seeing what Jackson State did are going to probably try to say they should go the celebrity coach route. I don't know how everyone in here feels about it. I know when Southern was hiring their coach, a lot of people were screaming for a celebrity coach to be hired, and the Southern alum and fan in the chat really pushed back on that across multiple channels that suggested that. So I don't know. I think a celebrity coach has to fit the culture of the program to a point. Just any sort of celebrity coach isn't going to work everywhere. And not every celebrity coach is going to have the same pull and connections as Coach Prime did at Jackson State. So I think it has to be the right fit. I'll say that. I think it has to be the right fit for a program if they're going to go a celebrity coach. But I'll look at some guys who aren't celebrity coaches for Morgan State because I know Ray Lewis was a name that was coming up a lot from other shows that I was watching about the Morgan State head coaching job. I know if you're looking for current episodes on that, man, I think Tomorrow Leader Sports Network with Coach Walker. He talks a lot about Morgan State, and also I think it's Jeff Lightsley did an episode too on that hire at least, man. But uh, yeah, man, appreciate y'all support, man, for sure, for sure. But I guess last announcements, man, for I hop off here. We're interview with Dejean Dixon, Norfolk State defensive end, dropping tomorrow, man. Make sure to support all these players by supporting the interviews. I'll also have some great interviews, man. We got a kid from Harvard coming on the show very, very soon. We also got Nigel Hill from Delaware coming on the show very soon as well. So, and then also our film breakdowns on the top prospects, man. I dropped the first 3 prospects we're gonna do. Troy Anderson, Trevor Penning, and Christian Watson are probably the first 3 we're gonna drop for FCS film breakdowns. I think someone requested Tyree Carter, so I'm probably gonna do him as well. So man, I appreciate y'all support. But until next time, guys, the Blue Bloods are out.